Sort of Coming Chapter 896. Sorry, I uploaded the chapter 2 hours late, 28,000 word chapters. It was a torrential rain at noon, the sky was gloomy, the roads were muddy and mud splashed everywhere. There is a cable bridge across the river. The water under the bridge is surging. There was a group of people walking along the river with an umbrella. There was a swordsman in a green shirt and a woman in yellow clothes beside him. Behind them was a pair of young men and women, the man Yushu Linfeng and the woman tied the ball in a bun. There were also two men who looked like entourage, an old man and a young man with yellow hats, blue shoes and green bamboo sticks, walking at the end. The raindrops were as big as soybeans hitting the oil paper umbrella, crackling. In the distance, a light faintly as small as a firefly's. Qin Pingon glanced at the cable bridge on the river, which was drifting in the wind, and asked, "Is this the Jilin River where the first immortal picture came into existence?" Yi Yunyun nodded and said solemnly, "It's here." At dawn today, Yi Yunyun suddenly found Qin Pingon and asked him a favor. Since she and Jindingwen Du Hanling would definitely not be able to catch the thief and catch the stolen goods, she just wanted to see if she could follow the vines so that she could get along with him. Du Hanling, there is a plausible reason for going up the mountain and asking for boxing. The monarch on the Tonggishao mountain, dare to be that momentary companion with himself? Yi Yunyun had to weigh it. A golden monk with a hidden head and tail, weighed by the caddy in his body, how many caddies it was in the end. As for whether Du Hanling is now Yuan Ying or has sneaked into Yupu, she only needs to ask her a fist and she will come to the bottom, and then we will know Du Guanz's golden-branched and jade-leaved immortal muscles and bones. After dismantling, in the end there are several double. Yi Yunyun has not lost her heart, and now she will definitely not go to study the so-called Fuwan soaring method of the wall map, which has been sealed up in Pushun's secret storehouse. Anyway, owing one favor is owing, and owing two is also owing. Yi Yunyun wants to pull Qin Pingon on, come to Chilinjiang to explore the truth and see if she can help her find some missing clues. The other party agreed to go down the mountain together. As expected to be Brother Embroidery Tiger, he is really thoughtful and he is also the owner of the mountain. The difference between the two sides is not a little bit. People are more popular than others and they are better at calculating people. Or these scholars are better at it. In that pavilion last night, the young mountain owner is just after a few glances at Xiantu, you can see through layers of confusion and help her count the secrets. Yi Yunyun began to explain in detail the origins of a fairy picture for Qin Pingon. The fairy picture went all the way, and the place where I really got my hands was a small ferry on the mountain called Lshangdu, located in Yuanguo with our feet. This Xianyuan country is adjacent to each other. A few years ago, I heard that there was a big demon hiding in the mountains on the border of Yuan country not long after the country was restored, accidentally revealing clues. Xue Huai rushed over first, according to Dafu Academy's instructions. The espionage shows that the other party is inferred to be a ghost repair monster in the nascent soul realm. I am worried that the other party has hidden the realm. The gentleman of the academy will be sent to death if he goes. Xue Huai can't save anyone, so he went down the mountain alone, but it's a pity to stay there. After more than 10 days searching the mountain to no avail. During the period I happened to pass by the Lshangdu that Pushun rented out in the early years. At that time there was a Shanzi Yeshio in the lower 5 realms. The old man and a young man were setting up a stall on the side of the road together. I just glanced at it casually. Even the worthless guys, among them are the exquisitely crafted golden chambers, they are fair in appearance, but they can barely be used for decoration, so they plan to give it to Yi Xuanji. Seeing that my eyes are stuck, the old monk began to sell and boast, saying this is an old object flowing out of Yuanguo Palace, or a clear confession from the Emperor's imperial study room. With a glance at the goods, the door opens and it is so close to the emperors of the Yuan dynasty, hundreds of years old. It is drenched in dragon spirit. The old monk raised his hands and offered 10 copper coins, probably because he was afraid that I would be too expensive. If he said that 8 coins, the price really couldn't be lower. Hearing this, Chao Qingqing was a little puzzled. A gold cabinet made by the imperial palace only sells for 10 cents? So she turned her head and looked at Pei Qian, who was on the side. Pei Qian laughed and explained, Bao Fuzhai has his own set of black words saying that it is $10, but in fact it is 10 snowflake money. If someone doesn't even understand this, that Baozhai can kill pigs as much as possible. Qin Pingon asked, in this golden chamber secreted by the Yuan State Palace, does it happen to contain that fairy picture? Yi Yunyun said, annoyed, this is the problem. In fact, the golden chamber was empty at the time, which made me mistakenly think that I had picked up a huge leak. When I used 8 snowflakes to buy the golden chamber, I lost it. Xianxia seemed to remember something and asked me if I knew how to calligraphy and painting. He still had a better-looking treasure on hand. It was definitely an orderly collection of Yuanguo's heritage. The old monk raised his hand and vowed to keep it if he had cheated. There was a thunderstorm in the sky. I didn't take it seriously. I just said that I could take a look. As a result, the dull boy next to the old monk, he went straight through a sack beside his feet, checked it, took out the fairy scroll and threw it in on the stall. Qin Pingon heard the words with a smile and said, "The young and old cooperating in singing double reeds are a qualified burden." Yi Yunyun didn't hear the ridicule and continued, "As soon as I started with the scroll, I knew it was good, because Dao Xen gave birth to ripples, and it was the monks who seized the opportunity of the Dao. A sign. I waited until I unfolded the picture scroll for a while and finally stabilized my mind. At that time, I mistakenly thought that it was not long after I had been in the Jade Realm. It was the kind of mysterious gift from the mountain with the Fuyuan gift. Snow money. I bought the fairy picture. After the 2 parties agreed to leave, I left the stall a few steps, and found that the old monk had already taken the young man to roll up the bedding and ran away. I was still amused at the time, but now knowing that I was a fool. After I got the Xian too, I thought I was careful enough because I also went to the Huangshiqing in Yuan country in secret. The old one has been reduced to ruins and was newly built after the war, so there are indeed a lot of secret files scattered around. I was still in the Huangshiqing warehouse over there and found a lot of similar ancient camphor wood golden chambers. Naturally, it was not the emperor's writing room that Baozhai said. After that, I continued to look up the books and I found it. The entry about that ancient painting is indeed true. The above written record is clear. It was originally obtained from a quarrying office on the bank of the Jilin River 300 years ago by the quarrying craftsman who inadvertently salvaged it from the bottom of the river. Although the iron box was not a beautiful stone, the official office did not dare to hide privately. The iron box picture scroll and the batch of beautiful stones mined in the river were all included in the Beijing tribute. And that generation of Yuan dynasty emperor, I had a mediocre impression of the picture scroll, and I quickly lost it to the Huang Shirqing collection after seeing it, and the tin box for painting that showed the water drawing on all 6 sides, according to the file records, was nowhere to be found. I was still not at ease in the end. I personally came to the Jilin River and explored the bottom of the river for 600 miles. I didn't let go of a few tributaries. I just wanted to see if there were any Xianfu ruins, but I couldn't find any abnormalities at the beginning. Because the words of the old monk Baozhai were verified to be false, Yi Yunyun took it even more seriously. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Huangshiqing is very common with thieves, and they are all elegant thieves that are difficult to guard against." Looking at the turbulent Jilin River, Qin Pingon remembered the Longxi River in his hometown for no reason. Not long after he left his hometown, countless people moved after hearing the wind, almost every household, carrying baskets into the water to hunt for treasures just to find them. The serpentine stone that everyone would only consider as a child's plaything at home, but the people in the small town went too late and rarely gained anything. Probably this is considered the early bird has the worm? So last night at the Pushun Pavilion, Qin Pingon and Huang Yiyun said, "The news from the mountain is the money of the gods," with full sincerity. On the way before the imperial wind came Shui Huai, who was knowledgeable, and Qin Pingon had already mentioned this Jilin River. Since ancient times there has not been any water hebo sitting on the town, but the river is rich in beautiful stones, and the sound is as clear as a chime and the color is like jade. The color is different, the blue color is mostly and the red is the best. The stone pattern is like red carp scales. It is extremely famous. The large one can be used as a feng shui stone for the rich and the family. The small one can also be used as a study room by the literati. Therefore, in the history of Yuan state, quarrying bureaus were set up intermittently on the riverside, mining river rocks to fill the national treasury. And whenever the imperial court abolished the government's water sealing period, there would be athletes who were proficient in water, sneaking into the river bottom to quarry, and to a large extent the wealth of the green dress crossing came from this. But merchants were chasing profits, cheating and splicing. The methods are endless, and they will deliberately cut the mountain into a thin and leaky posture. This is called the doubling of the price of the stone belt hole, and gold is made from nothing. The price of sick plums and official plums that are deliberately cut into strange shapes is much higher than that of common wild plums. Over time, the local and some surrounding fairy masters in Yuanguo were tacitly aware. Anyway, it was also a fool to deceive those people from outsiders who had a lot of money. Pushun Yunkatang's children are talented and elegant, and there will be almost 1 or 2 desk confessions carved from beautiful stones. Of course they can't be fakes. In the central area of Tonggishao, the gatekeepers of Junwang have the highest rank, and they are often divided into 6 grades according to the rules, such as Gaoliang, Huaying, and A, B, C, and D. Tonggishao is the most closed island among the Haoran Jiuzhou. 1. There are too many landscaping places, rich in produce, 1 continent and many plains, all of them are the land of fish and rice, and there are countless places with abundant mountains and rivers. Otherwise, although there were not many sects in Tonggishao, there were no exceptions. They are all great immortals with profound heritage, but in the end they didn't even have a transcontinental ferry. The immortal family on the mountain and the imperial princes and princesses at the foot of the mountain can be described as rich and mountainous, the most arrogant. Pushun, which has a title deed to a box on the mountain, is an excellent example. It's just that the enclaves in Pushun are still well-founded. They are the ancestors of the past. They bought them with real immortal money or incense at a very low price. Qin Pingon suddenly asked, since it's said that it's hundreds of years old, it's common for rivers to change course in history and to say goodbye to the old and welcome the new. When Lord Yishan came to this Jilin River to visit the immortals, did you ask, have you passed the local people or carefully searched the historical geography of Yuan country, and looked through the local prefectures and counties? Yi Yunyun was dull and silent, her face full of embarrassment. I was in a hurry at the time, how could I get so much? In order to alleviate Huang Yun's embarrassing situation, Qin Pingon had to take the initiative to change the subject. On the top of the Huang Shiqing's secret file about the iron box, besides the 6-sided drawing of water, is there any more written record? Yi Yunyun immediately nodded and said, yes. In addition to the water map, the 6 sides are divided into the ancient seal, ups and downs, twists, turbid, squishy, deep, clear and shallow. Qin Pingon had to say something ambiguous. Master Yishan is still very careful. Yi Yunyun's smile was far-fetched. How did this kind words from the man next to him sound like cursing? It's just that Qin Pingon couldn't help asking more. 6-faced water map. Is there a copy of the new Huangshiqing archives in Yuanguo? It stands to reason that there will definitely be related rubbings on the Huangshiqing side, and there must be no steps from the warehouse. So Yi Shanju continued to be silent. How did I meet a teacher who checked his schoolwork with a schoolboy? Qin Pingon was a little helpless. Forget it, anyway it's a silly account after the autumn is settled. Anyway, this is the end of the matter and it is useless to say more. Pei Qian asked himself, at best he was able to think about finding rubbings more than Huang Yun because he wanted to put the baby in a nest. For example, the diversion of the tributaries of the rivers, Pei Qian would never think of it. Xue Huai was full of emotion in his heart. He really complied with the old saying that people should be thrown to death than people. Yunkatang still lacks a real pillar. Otherwise it will only rely on the master to support the facade, and the master will have to make decisions in all aspects. It is inevitable that there will be some errors, Pushun. If there is such a careful young sword fairy sitting on the hill, it is estimated that he can really sit back and relax. Master Xue secretly glanced at his master, then glanced at the sword immortal in Qingshan with folded knives. Huh? Is there a chance for master so that he can shout with someone? Master? I just don't know whether Qin Jianxian has a Taoist companion on the mountain now. However, with Qin Pingan's realm identity and appearance, there must be no shortage of confidants on the mountain. Otherwise he would not become a good friend with Jiang Shangzhen. Where did Qin Pingan know what Xue Fuzi was thinking, but he turned his head and smiled and chatted. Before I arrived at Pushun I read this Jiguai. In addition to the grievances between Donghai women and Qing Hongjun, there is also a dragon. How true or false is the content of the travel story of a real Hushan person in the book? Xue Huai shook his head and said, the true and false are unpredictable and there is no evidence to find out. It used to be based on some gossips to try to find the fairy ruins, but unfortunately I tried to find out the ruins and found nothing. It is rumored that thousands of years ago when a celestial master of Long Hushan went down to visit Tonggishao, he encountered the side branch of Dadu ancient dragon palace. There were dozens of wicked dragons on the land, causing wind and waves and boundless floods. This person did not testify at that time. The Huangzi noblemen of the Xianxia mansion fought with the dragons who had caused the disaster, divided and ruled them and killed most of them. Then they nailed a dragon to the cliff with a peach and wood sword, cut off the dragon's tail and made a green bamboo sword. The mountain range was used as a dragon rope, and a celestial edict was issued with it, instructing it not to leave the mountain half a step within 1,000 years. The other Jiao fled around, desperate, and was eventually driven into a local Taoist temple by the celestial master, and had to be turned into a knocker and promised that celestial master would protect the Taoist temple for 300 years. In the end, the celestial master personally digs an ancient well, casts an iron tree next to it, and suppresses the first evil dragon in it. Only then did the heavenly master go to Dadu Dragon Palace to question the old dragon who had no way of discipline and negligence in his duties. The old dragon cried out and had to intercede with the Lord Long, who was in charge of the entire East China Sea. It is said that this landscape lawsuit finally hit the Middle-earth Confucian temple. Under the Hauran Mountain there are many themes. The writing is full of grotesque, legendary public cases, smoked foxes, strange marriages, and you will be true. Qin Pingon smiled and said, if Master Shui has a chance in the future, he can go to the Daquan dynasty to try his luck, start with the Imperial History Church or the Ministry of Rights, and see if he can borrow the files. Shui Huai nodded and said, just listen to Lord Qin. If there are any clues and I accidentally find out the main site of the Dadu Dragon Palace, I will definitely notify Lord Qin as soon as possible and enter the Dragon Palace to explore the treasures together. Afterwards, all the profits will be divided between Luopishan and Pushan. Yi Yunyun said in a huff, Shui Huai, what are you dreaming about? Today is different. Hauran now has Sahajan again. Even if this kind of sight is lucky enough to see the sun again, it will naturally belong to the true dragon of Aquarius Island. If you dare to be greedy for the treasure of Molong Palace, you are not afraid of being landed ashore from the East China Sea. If you ask the teacher if you don't agree, you will come to flood Pushan directly? Speaking of this, Yi Yunyun asked curiously, Lord Qin, I heard that the place where the true dragon was cultivated is the Liju Cave Sky where your Luopa mountain is located. In this way, isn't she and you close at hand? Neighbors? Qin Pingon treated people with sincerity and nodded and said, it's a neighbor. Yi Yunyun asked, I also heard that the newly promoted Dong Hai Sea Lord is already in the Ascended Realm. Is Lord Qin Shan familiar with her? Last night the pavilion left. In addition to sulking, Yi Yunyun was actually not idle at all. She quickly reported the landscape mansion to the dead sheep to make up for it. He even made a special trip down the mountain to the water temple of Ko Xietsu, and Qingshui Jun's mansion at the mouth of the sea. Asked for a large stack of diaries related to Aquarius Island, especially Luopa Mountain. I didn't know it. I was shocked when I saw that the little cave sky that was reduced to a blessed land after falling to the ground had so many young geniuses in my mind, except for the one who became the only true dragon in the world. Women's Ascension Realm Luopashenchen Pingon Longquan Jianzong Lu Xianyang Makushuan, one of the 10 young candidates in the world, and Jing Zhongzhong, a beta Sheng named Charan, and nicknamed Madman, a direct disciple. Qin Pingon had to say, the neighbor next door. Yi Yunyun couldn't understand. After all, the monks on the mountain, even if they are thousands of miles away, are not considered next door? Qin Pingon said helplessly, it means literally. Seeing that the other party seemed reluctant to talk about the real dragon, Yi Yunyun remembered another interesting incident and asked casually, how many times has Lord Qin participated in your night banquet at Piyun Mountain in Beiyue? Qin Pingon was embarrassed. Not once. Yi Yunyun was a little puzzled. How did she feel that she made a mistake and got all the places back? In the heavy rain, a group of people walked along the faint light. It turned out that there was a tea shed on the shore and the business was deserted. At the moment there was no guest sheltering from the rain. There was only an old woman in it with a girl who was about a granddaughter sitting around, chatting by the brazier, watching the torrential rain outside the shed together. The fire is warm, and a pot of rice wine is being burned to keep out the cold. The girl looks at the age of 14 or 5. Although her clothes are shabby, she has a snow-skinned face and her demeanor charming. Standing at the door of the tea shed, Qin Pingon turned around first, turning his back to the tea shed, shaking the rain outside. The group put away the oil paper umbrellas in their hands. But a little emo is missing. Seeing the visitor, although she was surprised, the old woman immediately got up and waited for the guests and asked the guests how many bowls of hot tea they would like. Yi Yunyun smiled and said that everyone would have a bowl first, and when she was sure that there was a real business coming, the girl got up, walked a few steps, glanced back at her. She didn't know what she saw and she smiled. The old woman and her granddaughter brought tea to the table together, and then sat down over the brazier again. The old woman smiled and said, "This is the old fish blowing waves. The guest officers don't have to make a fuss. The tea shed business is good or bad, it depends on the day. If there is a temple fair in the county town or during festivals, some people going to the fair may stop here to drink a bowl of tea soup on the way back and forth." At this moment, the old woman speaks the Mandarin of a country with a strong local accent. Unlike Aquarius, Dali Mandarin is a dialect of a continent. When traveling, unless it is a remote county in a small country, her speech is extremely smooth. And Tonggi's his Ijo Yayan can be regarded as the most untrue in Hauranjiuzhou. It is often in the Mandarin of various countries and each speaks its own words. After that war, only the Daquan dynasty will spare no effort to promote Ijoya. The language and the awe-inspiring words of Zhongtu Shenzhou, and included one of the assessment content of the Jingcha plan, both up and down. In fact, within a few years from the capital to the local government, officials took the lead, and the ruling and opposition parties almost quickly became familiar with the two. Yi Yunyun helped relay the content to Chen Pingan. The old woman glanced at the man in the green shirt who was sitting next to the woman in yellow clothes, and asked with a smile, "This lady, does he come here with the master to see the scenery? Looks pretty good." Yi Yunyun was a little helpless, so she didn't repeat it, shook her head and said, "I'm just friends with him." The old woman smiled and said, "It's a pity." Thanks to Qin Pingan's heartfelt reminder, Yi Yunyun just copied the original words and asked the old woman with a smile, "Old ma'am, do you know if there were any rivers, streams, etc. that had dried up earlier on the upper and lower reaches of the Jilin River? Is there any weirdness now?" The old woman smiled, "Miss Hui, I have never heard of a river without water, but there are often ghosts on the riverside. I like to be charming in the day and find young people to die, not to say that it is us locals. It's the gods who pass by and there is nothing to do. The officials from the county government come here almost every year to invite people to do things. My tea shed has been open for many years, but I have seen some Taoist priests, monks and as far as the inside. Is there a legendary fairy master? How dare I ask more?" Xiaomo walked into the tea shed and sat beside Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan just asked for a bowl of hot tea and handed it to Xiaomo. After Xiaomo took the tea bowl, he took out a few stones from his sleeve and placed them gently on the table. Qin Pingan picked up one of the red stones and the lines really looked like layers of crimson fish scales. Pei Qian gathered the sound into a thread and asked, "Master, are these few river stones a bit like the serpentine stones of the Longshu River?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Like, but the rank is much lower. It may be that there are real descendants of the dragon who have been hiding here for a long time, invisibly turning part of the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth into the dragon energy, and the stones at the bottom of the river have been infiltrated by the Tao for thousands of years. Yunlongqi is similar to a monk forming a pill or deliberately peeling off some old scales and turning them into red-colored beautiful stones that can be used by the mountain masters to refine immortal materials, like saying hello to someone." He shouted from afar, "Don't forget this place." Qin Pingan didn't gather the sound lines or heartfelt words. If the book is true, it is true that the real Long Hushan passed by here, and there have been the fairy trails of demons and demons. I think it is the remnant of the dragon and the sin was not dead in the past. I was imprisoned here in the body of guilt. I didn't dare to leave the country without permission and crossed the Thunder Pond for half a step. I had to stay still. I could only wait for thousands of years for a real man's decree from the Heavenly Master's mansion." Seemingly unintentional. Meaningful. The old woman glanced at the green-shirt swordsman. Qin Pingan just turned his head and smiled at the old woman. The old woman looked at Yi Yunyun, pointed to the pot of rice wine and asked, "Madam, do you want to drink? It can warm your stomach better than tea soup. Homegrown brews can also be sold in tea shops, but it's not cheap. 20 cents for a pot of wine." Yi Yunyun glanced at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan received the reminder from Xiao Mo's heart, and nodded to Yi Yunyun, then grabbed the stone in his palm, got up and walked directly to the brazier and squatted, put the stone into the charcoal fire like a taro warmed up nearby, lowered his head. rubbing his hands and smiling. The gods are not beautiful, the wind and rain are torrential. In the big waves there is no fear or worry. It turned out that Xiaomo just took a closer look, and by coincidence it turned out to be an engagement shop. The person who did it was not the old woman, but the girl next to this old woman. Just now the newcomer returned to her old career and showed his feet on Xiaomo's side. Otherwise it would really be dark again. The ancient engagement shop holds the world's marriage slips, checks the books to the month, and matches the ankle, wrist and heart of men and women according to different marriages. There was once a marriage department in the old heaven, where the mistresses of Mingyue were separated, and the number of engagement shops in the jurisdiction varied. 10,000 years later, when he returned to the world, Xiaomo didn't even mention seeing this kind of engagement shop with his own eyes. Even if he looked through the Shanshang Dibao and Xianxia Zashu, he didn't see this long-standing title. On the other hand, Yuelao said that he would lead the red line and check the marriage book, but it is countless. Marriage in the world is fixed and immutable. The old woman's avenues and feet are not rare, but just an old horn that hangs down. It is estimated that this engagement shop was built by the chance and identity of a half-baked. When Xiaomo met him on the earth in the past, he didn't bother to take a look. Generally speaking, the other party doesn't dare to look at himself, worrying about being mistaken for a questioning sword. Therefore, even those amphibious real dragons holding the heavenly rain-walking talisman would immediately give way when they saw themselves 10,000 years ago. Back then, Xiaomo liked to travel the world by himself, probably because of his bright attire, so he was easily identified. A Jianxiu who can chat with Bixiaodong master and can also make wine together, his temper and temperament naturally don't have to guess. Lifting his head, Qin Pingon looked at the young girl who had moved the bench and sat beside the old woman. He stood up, raised her foot and said with a smile, "Little girl, the marriage line can't be implicated indiscriminately, please put it away." The girl was dazed, charming and innocent. Qin Pingon put his fingers together, made an understatement and swiped lightly towards his feet, cutting off the invisible red line that drew him and Yi Yunyun's ankle on the spot. The girl suddenly narrowed a pair of almond eyes. According to master, it is undoubtedly a sword fairy on the mountain. Without using the magic weapon or the flying sword of his life, he instantly cut off the line of marriage he set, and it was as easy as cutting tofu with a knife, so it must be a fairyland cultivation base. The old woman stared at the green-shirted swordsman. She sighed, patted the girl's head and signaled that she would not be afraid. The old woman might know that today is destined to be bad. She lowered her head and smiled, and she found out from her sleeve a purple lens with a subtle curvature, then twisted the corners of the clothes, gently wiped. The material is similar to colored glaze but not colored glaze, and the precision of the stonework is by no means able to sharpen the craftsman of Yamashita. The old woman raised her head, restored her original voice and said hoarsely, "I never thought that I could be fortunate enough to meet such a young land sword fairy in a place so far away from ancient Shu." Qin Ping placed it on deaf ears, but he just kept his sleeves in his hands, glanced at the objects in the hands of the old woman and learned a lot. The Dragon Palace grows jade ji, cultivates purple glass. The texture is clear and clear, almost the secret of the Liuli Pavilion of the Baidi city of later generations. And in the Middle-earth Shenzhou, this thing still has a magical effect. It is most suitable to be used to make a kind of auxiliary telescope artifacts, some old and dim Shanxiaogongqing, or young officials who hurt their eyesight noble. With this, you can restore your eyesight as you were when you were young. In addition, the Qin Tianjian of the Middle-earth countries also has a secret item made by the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family. It is rumored that the mortal son of the naked eye can also see the stars from a distance as the present thing. Looking at the stars in the sky, the context is clear, as easy as a man looking at the mountains and rivers of the world. Qin Pingon squatted down again, warming his hands, and asked with a smile, "The iron box at the bottom of the river that draws the water map is an old artifact from somewhere in the Dragon Palace. The old mother's treasured collection? 300 years ago, who was it again? From the Yuan State Palace?" The old woman looked at the gentle-looking sword fairy in Qingshan and smiled. As long as the sword fairy can help to take a talisman, the old man must know everything to say today. Otherwise, the old woman shook her head. Otherwise, even if the sun is a sword fairy on the mountain, he really dare not kill me. Qin Pingon nodded and said, "A real man from the Heavenly Master's Mansion's handwritten talisman is indeed not only a lei qi prohibition, but it can also be used as a life-saving talisman." The old woman glanced at the Pushan Huang Yun, and then withdrew her gaze, looking at the man in the green shirt who was in front of him with a mouthful of Tongji's his mellow and elegant words, and sincerely admired. The Sun Wei is really with unique insight. Like a few treasures. 3,000 years ago, the battle of slashing the dragon killed the descendants of the world's flood dragons and thousands of aquatic races. They stagnated in the nascent soul realm. There is no ichthyosaur change in the world. Now that the ban on mountains and rivers is lifted, if the world's aquatic people are amnesty, they will gather at the Dragon Gate on the side of Baidi City. It's a pity that there is no real person from the Heavenly Master's mansion on Longhu Mountain to expose the forbidden talisman with the mighty heavenly power for her. It seems to have forgotten about it completely. Yi Yunyun took a sip of the tea soup feeling dull. The heavy rain stopped outside the tea shed. Walked into a purple-clothed Taoist. The veteran Taoist is now the true guardian of Lianghua. Long Hushan is surnamed the Great Heavenly Master Liang Shuang. The old woman looked at the old real person with a strong purple zodiac and she was familiar with it. Although she was not the young celestial master of Long Hushan back then, she was finally waited by herself for a real person from the Heavenly Master's mansion. She looked sluggish for a moment. Suddenly his voice was sharp, his hands were like hooks, his fingers pressed against his dry cheeks, like a smile but not a smile, like crying but not crying, like crazy, almost begging, and said in a trembled voice, "I implore the Heavenly Master to take away the talisman, beg for the truth. Wai Qian, I know I was wrong." After the old man held his hands, he ignored the sad old woman, just smiled and said, "In this world, learning to do good deeds is not so simple. If you still want to start and end well, it will be even more difficult." Liang Shuang came to the brazier, gently pressed Qin Pingan's shoulder, who wanted to get up, and squatted together. The old man picked up the pot of hot rice wine, drank it, twisted a piece of red charcoal with his fingers, and wiped the corners of his mouth. Then tossed the empty hip flask back and throw it into the Jilin River. The old true man still said to himself, "Just like the little friend Qin who hits me right next to me, is it not young and frivolous, easy to know the height of the sky? So I have done things of volition and sacrifice, and I have done it several times at a young age, luckily. Not dying, in the eyes of outsiders, it is natural that good luck is the end of the matter, but what is the taste here? It is not enough for outsiders to know what it is like." Qin Pingan took out 2 pots of glutinous rice, fermented rice, and put them in the charcoal fire. The old man waited for the wine to get warmer and asked casually, "Xiao Yuqin, since I like to read miscellaneous books so much, are there some favorite legends? Let me just guess if there is one Qi, if so. Well, but the one by Wen Feiqing? A real person counts as a person, it's a must." Qin Pingan smiled knowingly and nodded. Among the 3 favorite legends of the younger generation, there is indeed the Dou Yi. In fact, a pseudonym was used in the past. Among the alternate names in a large basket, Dou Yi, who is rare in this name, actually went hand in hand with Chaomo. Now he intends to travel with Lu Jinglong to the Divine Continent in the future, so he will use this pseudonym. The old man asked again, "Where is this most wonderful article?" Qin Pingan replied, "Young Dou Yi once planted trees silently for 5 years. If I want to come here, I'm the only person in the book who knows himself. I'm afraid that Wen Feiqing would not be able to empathize." The old real man threw the charcoal fire into the basin, caressed his palms and laughed and said loudly, "Sure enough, I have a good relationship with Qin Xiaoyu for a good reason. As the Yin of the real Liang Shuang, all happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy are unfettered." Except for the 2 sides of the conversation, the rest of the people in the tea shed were all at a loss. Chao Qingqing, Xiaomao, and Pushan Shuefuzi, these scholars of course have heard of the Wen Feiqing, who is known as the Graceful Poetry School, but they really don't know what Wen Qi wrote and passed down to the world. Only then did the old real man pick up his eyes, looked at the old woman who was already on her knees, and said, "Please, what is it? Is it useful?" The old man smiled. "Besides, I don't need to ask anymore. I won't drink your pot of wine for nothing." The old woman was surprised to find that the celestial talisman on her body had disappeared before she knew it. The old man reminded, "Don't knock your head, be careful of my birthday, and I'll post a new talisman when you get angry. Get up quickly, it's just like opening a door to welcome guests, it's not asking or not. What you want?" The old woman sat on the bench, looked at the sword immortal in green shirt, and said sternly, "Report to the sword immortal. A young Taoist priest who wandered here back then bought the iron box from my side. I saw that he was peaceful. Mountain Taoist priest. The other party also showed me the Jade Patriarch Hall. I checked the authenticity and agreed. It's just that the old man wanted to explain to Qin Jianxian that there was actually nothing in the iron box back then. Qin Pingon knew clearly that it was the culprit who created the Tapingshan civil strife together with the sword-backed old ape. The other party was very well hidden unconsciously and was indeed one of the Tapingshan monks. The other party was one of the great monsters that had long been hidden in Tonggishao in the wild world. He went around in the final analysis. It was Wen Hai's careful plan. It seems that Zhou Mi once had the ambition to win Pushan. The old woman looked at the expressionless Qin surnamed Jianxian, feeling distraught, and subconsciously hugged the girl aside. She is the only disciple I collect. Before, she rashly led the red line and was also instructed by me behind the scenes, begging the heavenly master. Even if you punish Qin Jianxian, don't hurt her. Qin Pingon nodded, stood up and walked out of the tea shed together with Lao Zhenren and Xue Huai. When he reached the riverside, Qin Pingon stopped, looked at the unknown Pushan Xue Fuzi, squinted and said, "You can come out now since the old man is here. I don't think there is any need to hide, right?" Jiang Shang really expected that there was nothing wrong with it. Inside the Pushan Yunkateng, there is indeed a backhand buried. It is this long-distance martial artist who has the best reputation in Pushan, and is the most respected direct disciple of Huang Yiyun, Xue Huai. The purple-clothed Taoist smiled while stroking his beard, a ghost in the Yupu realm that was living in the spirit of the martial artist in a sneaky manner. He wanted to hide under his eyelids like something. Isn't it the 14th realm to bully the poor road? In a short while the Jade Profound Realm monster race ghost was not given a chance at all. The old real man had already searched the mountain back and forth, twisting a mustard seed-sized soul between his fingers. Xue Huai only felt his head split and the pain was like a knife, so he raised his hands and Qin Pingon immediately stretched it out. Grabbing Xue Fuzi's arm with his hand, he helped stabilize the opponent's pure innocence so that it would not overwhelm the human world, which would damage the body like a flood. After a while, Xue Huai sweated and smiled bitterly. "Lord Qin Shan, did I write the Tao earlier?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's because the other party is involuntarily calculating, let alone a ghost in the upper 5 realms who is proficient in ecstasy. In fact, Master Xue doesn't need to blame himself too much. In fact, it was Qin Pingan's blindness, not all guessing. People who are dark under the lights are often the closest to the lights. Qin Pingan is familiar with this kind of thing anyway. Then there are only a handful of candidates who can replace Huang Yiyun in Pushan. In addition to Xue Huai, who is not high in seniority but extremely prestigious, there is actually Pu Shanzhang Lv Tan Rong, and the Ancestors' Hall in charge of the money, Yi Yunyun's elder brother. Therefore, at the gate of the mountain, Qin Pingan deliberately chatted with Jinshi, in order to be able to take the opportunity to chat with the old Yuanying, so that Xiao Mo could observe more in secret. There must be some people who are smarter than the bad guys so that more good people can be rewarded, so that more good people can do good deeds, and they can be completely reckless. Xue Huai stopped talking and finally nodded and clasped his fists silently. Qin Pingon had to clasp his fists in return. The old man smiled and said, "Master Xue, you go back to the tea shed first. I will have a few more words with Xiao Yuqin." Xue Huai still didn't say anything. It was just that he saluted the Taoist in purple, who was definitely not just a real person from Liangguo Huoguo, to thank him, straightened up, turned and walked away. After Xue Huai returned to the tea shed, Lao Zhenren and Qin Pingan took a stroll along the riverbank after the rain. Today there are halfways between humans and ghosts. Oh, slashing demons and eliminating demons, real demons, slaying and surrendering the real gods, come here at your fingertips, but relying on the realm of Taoism, such as the vigorous physical strength of the common folks. Sure, the eyes of the sky are opened and you can know it at a glance. It is a pity that there are endless human hearts and ghosts, and the endless fly camp and go-go. The old real man sighed and said nothing. Difficult as difficult as the sky, easy as a palm. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Even if the manpower is destined to be exhausted, we must do our best first and then listen to the destiny. It is nothing more than being able to accomplish what is in front of you is one thing, and being able to contribute a point is a point." The old man nodded, yes. The old Zhenren was ready to return to the Taoist temple of Liangguo, and smiled before leaving. Encourage each other. It means that the old man himself will stay here for many years for the matter of mending the old mountains and rivers of Tonggishao, and there will be many opportunities for the two sides to deal with each other in the future. Qin Pingon said solemnly, to encourage each other. The old man finally laughed and said, besides the previous mountain shrine, in order to test your boy's Taoism, you have to talk nonsense. Even if the boy has heard it, don't have a grudge. The young man categorically said, real people don't worry, the younger generations don't hold any grudges. After returning to the tea shed, Qin Pingon found that the 2 pots of glutinous rice wine from his hometown were warm and proper, but the old man left without drinking it and picked it up. Everyone shared the drink, and the old woman and the young girl were no exception. The smiling old woman said that she was too happy to be overjoyed. She had been sitting next to the brazier and was wiping tears from her eyes. When she saw Qin Pingon, she drank the bowl of glutinous rice wine and even shouted at her. The sides stared wide-eyed, holding the wine bowl but not drinking, just looking at the sword fairy in Xianxia, very curious. It seems that the scenery in her eyes is better than wine. Yi Yunyun was also much more relaxed, although she still couldn't get any conclusive evidence from Chilinjiang, so that she could ask Du Hanliang for a fight. However, the disciple Xue Huai lacked the weird scourge that was likely to have caused the turmoil in Pushan, and Yi Yunyun, who had always been deserted, had a somewhat smiley face. When Qin Pingon got up to leave, the old woman hurriedly got up, gave a blessing and said with gratitude, Qin Jianxian, this time I got out of trouble and I will be free again. There is no way for my old body to repay. I don't want to thank you. Qin Pingon thought for a while, since you said that you don't want to thank you, what else can I say? Originally he wanted to ask the old woman about those Jiangzhong American stones that Xiaoma described as a considerable quantity. Can both parties make a fair price on the mountain? Taking a step back anyway, compared to the girl who was the treasurer of the engagement shop, learning the words that misunderstood her children in the book, she suddenly came up with the phrase, the sun is great, the little girl promises by his body, is much better. When the young girl was about to turn around and leave, the young girl blinked suddenly. Qin Pingon turned around with lightning speed, and the girl, who twisted her wrist lightly, stared fiercely and warned with a heartfelt voice, this girl, please don't take revenge. With an innocent look on her face, the young girl hiccuped her mouth and smiled. After Qin Pingon left the tea shed, he did not go to Pushan again but made a temporary conscious. He did not return to Xiandu Mountain. He took a little detour and took a trip to the water boundary called Xinhe because of his family. The wind and kite ferry crosses the mountains and rivers of 3 continents. On this continent of Tongya, from north to south, there are Qingjingshan Qinghu Palace, On Xiandu Mountain, Lingbai Mountain, Yayandu, Dequan Dynasty Tayedu, a long river with many tributaries. And then Yuguazong and the southernmost Kishandu. In addition to Aquarius Island and Baijulu Island, there are 5 ferry stops each, making a total of 17 Xianxia ferry ports. A group of people hovered in the white clouds in the wind. Qin Pingon looked at the big river at his feet, near the water source, and there was already a prototype of the Xianxia ferry on the ground. Of course it belonged to another family. This great river of thousands of miles connected with the West China Sea has long had many forces, and they all coincided with each other. This place is very likely to become a cornucopia of feng shui treasures, because of the vast area nearby, not to mention the sect or the alternate sect even shouting. There are no Yuan-Ing realms that can be named, only a few are busy making sacrifices to the Golden Core and Earth Immortals, who are national teachers or pioneers. Therefore there are 5 or 6 immortal forces that are quite far away from their own hills, or with those nearby Xianxia dynasties and vassals that have just been restored or newly established. The incense-loving Xianxia sects formed alliances with each other, and began to build their own ferry crossings on both sides of the strait one after another, and then invited monks who were proficient in water law to come out to help, or use their own magical powers or arrange formations, gather the long river water transport, condense and stay together. Other forces are vying for the aura of heaven and earth. It's a simple truth. If you eat the same bowl of rice on a table, whoever eats more will eat less and whoever eats will be hungry. Qin Pingon continued to drive along the big river to the middle of the river and soon reached the destination of the trip. According to Cui Dongshan, the various forces fought over and over and fought a few fights, and finally the 2 places in Dahiwanwai plus the middle section, there were only 3 hills, which is considered a firm foothold. The other forces have all continued, or give up actively or passively. As a result, a riverside ferry that was abandoned halfway, can be removed and taken away, has been relocated, but there is still a rudimentary shell of the fairy, but the foundation of the fairy has been laid. Don't underestimate these geotechnical matters. Just ramming the earth will consume a lot of manpower and material resources. Just say that the mountain roots shake when the fairy landed and docked. If the fairy is not strong enough, there will be a big pit that is very involved on the spot. Therefore, the old master of the fairy here, who had lost a lot of fairy money, was really unsure of being able to make money, so he stopped in time and withdrew. The construction of a ferry on the mountain is just a job to fill a huge lake with gold and silver mountains. The risk is huge and can be regarded as a gamble. In addition to making great efforts to build landscape formations, building docks everywhere and then gathering ore of landscapes, it is a huge expense. Otherwise, which fairy is in the brain and is willing to spend money to dock here to replenish the aura? And once the ferry is completed in the end, there were not a few ferry boats to patronize, and it would even make ends meet. Not to mention the immortal money, it would even cause the division to hang on a tree. A tasteless magic weapon can also be sold at a low price. But who would be stupid to take over this kind of unmoving mountain fairy? Moreover, the emergence of any brand new fairy is a battle for people and money for the neighboring Xianxia ferry, which is tantamount to a dispute over a great road. Because the number of ferry boats has increased or decreased in general, the new ferry port has to take a share of the same bowl. Qin Pingon looked at the big river under his feet. After Nujiadu and Yayandu, this is the third Xianjidu crossing in the mountain. In the eyes of outsiders, the brand new and unusual remains of the ferry crossing here have been picked up for nothing by an unknown ferry master of a shameless sect. A young man in white clothes set up a stall over there not long ago to greet the heroes from all walks of life. A table with 3 bowls of wine, threatening to the outside world, 3 punches, 3 attacking techniques. Sword fairy, he could only pass with 2 swords. Where can the 3 swords be held? Anyway, I don't want money, so I'll die. Killed me with 3 strokes and 2 swords and reported dozens of times. If I haven't gotten up yet, this ferry is yours. Therefore, at the ferry that was only 1,000 miles away, a martial arts master with a golden figure was hired to give a punch here. The handsome boy with a mole on his eyebrows shocked all the monks who watched the battle. It's not that a teenager pretends to be a pig and eats a tiger and how to use it to reach the sky, but after being asked about a punch, he flies upside down 10 tens of feet after only a punch, rolls all over the floor and then falls to the ground for a long time, still shaking. Weiwei raised an arm, which probably means to slowly, let me slowly, I can stand up immediately, I can definitely. After the golden-framed martial artist handed his fist, he stood there for a long time and didn't immediately make a move. Of course he asked the fist to be true. After all, he took a deposit from the immortal master fairy, but he didn't really want to kill him. What? Nowadays, Dafu Academy has strict rules. As long as there is a dispute under the mountain and the death of a genealogical teacher, he needs to report to the academy immediately. He is the most annoying to study in his life as a child, so naturally he does not want to go to Dafu Academy to make up a sum of study. When the young man stood up swayingly and patted his chest, he said something again. The result was a spurt of blood, and he almost lay on the ground to continue to rest. Therefore, the second punch of the Takeo had to be slightly retracted, and it still made the young man in white circling in the air, and then fell heavily to the ground. Takeo was puzzled on the spot, not to mention how lightly his punch was, but no matter what, there was definitely no spinning punch. With the third punch, Takeo almost bit the bullet and added gravity. After all, after the 3 punches, if the young man can stand up even if he runs for nothing, he will lose half of the fairy's money. After this punch, the poor young man supported the ground with both hands several times, trying to get up, vomiting blood several times, lying down heavily, dying, and finally touched the floor with a trembling hand and raised his thumb. Probably, I want to say, a good punch? In this way, that golden-bodied martial artist felt a little guilty. In the end, the boy still sat up when he was about to count to 9, then staggered to his feet. Takeo hurriedly helped the boy up, supported him, or dragged the boy to the wine stall. Takeo drank 3 bowls of wine by himself, clasped his fists and said goodbye, saying that he was offended. As for the remaining half of the immortal money that can only be earned in the bag by winning the punch, this golden martial artist doesn't think much about it. He loves how to do it. Anyway, I can't get rid of that ruthless hand. That day, the force that was building a ferry at the source of the Rin River immediately invited an old monk who was a bottleneck in the Golden Core realm. 2 natal creatures combined with the attacking technique were extremely powerful. After 3 consecutive spells, almost instantly, The young man in white lay in the big pit, ragged, foaming at his mouth and convulsing. As a result, before the 10 counts were reported, he got up with difficulty like a drunkard and walked to the side of the wine table. Old Jindan was unable to do so, but he snorted coldly and left without drinking. In less than an hour, at the ferry at the mouth of the big river, a golden core sword was dispatched to repair the horse, and the sword arrived. As a result, the fight became even more inexplicable. The meat bun hit the dog. Somehow, the golden core swordsman seemed to have just chatted with the young man in his heart, and he turned his face and refused to recognize people. Sword repaired a few words. After a large deposit, he didn't make a mistake, but he sacrificed his life flying sword toward the big river, and 3 swords cut through the air and finished the work. That's all. The golden core swordsman of the dog day, instead of the white-clothed young man, guarded the stall and threatened to change the rules, asked the fist and the sword and learned the Taoism all as usual, but he would give it back 3 times. In this way, who would dare to touch the bad? This Jindan Jianxiu is 100 years older, just 3 years old, and his name is Tao Ran. It was the native sword repairman of Tongyi's Hao, but it was always Xianxia repair. Now I was fishing by the river, occasionally catching an old turtle and stewing it in such a pot. I brought 7 or 8 kinds of condiments when I came, and I never treated myself badly. Qin Ping and fell on the river early and walked towards the simple stall. The sword repairman in the distance was dragging a fishing net to the stall on the shore, and several fish were jumping alive in the net. I just don't know how the sword fairy's craftsmanship is. The reason why Qin Pingon came here is actually another secret thing, that is, some people will establish a country near the ferry instead of rejuvenating the country, but to be precise, it can be regarded as a kind of rejuvenation by reluctance. Qingping Sword Sect in Xindu Mountain, the next ancestor master's family genealogy monk, Yuaning Realm Sword Repair Xiaopoxian will help the maid Menglong around him, give her the surname Dugu, renamed Dugu Menglong, and he himself will continue hiding behind the scenes, accurately let the surname of Dugu from the old Zhuing dynasty, who was destined to be hopeless in the restoration of the country, refounded in Tongyi's Hao and rebuilt the Taimiao, which can be regarded as a continuation of the Guozhua, but also properly separated from the old country of Aquarius. Relationship. Of course, Xiaopoxian got the instruction and support of Cui Dongshan for all this. With the character of Jun Jinqing of Zhongyue Mountain, he would definitely be on the top of his mountain. I would pay homage to the south again. The golden pill sword immortal came to the stall, threw the fishing net on the ground, pointed to the 3 bowls of wine on the table, and the group of people walking by the shore with an awkward voice, reminded the other party aloud, I am now in Xindu Mountain, the unnamed Kuqing for now. Jian Xiu Tao Ran started with the registration number, then stretched out his finger, pointed at the 3 wine bowls on the table and said, as soon as the notice is heard, the rules have changed now, each of which will make 3 moves. As for the location of Xindu Mountain, this Jindan Jianxiu, who is an anonymous guest, is actually not clear at the moment. He only knows that in the north, it is the white-clothed boy whose surname is Cui who is in charge of the house for the time being. The reason for turning to war: once I was injured in that battle in the early years. Jian Xin was almost broken, Dao Xin was even more sparse. In fact, it was a paper gold pill that I couldn't use. If you don't want to be an errand in a public door, you will never go in this life. I can't stand those people who have a different face before and after another. Otherwise, no matter how bad Tao Ran is still in the Golden Core realm or Jianxiu, how can he not show his face, earning this shameful immortal money, doing this kind of errands to use people's money to eliminate disasters? It's just that when I got here, I really couldn't beat the opponent, and the strength was very different. The guy who looked like a teenager turned out to be in the nascent soul realm. Then the other party promises that one day he will officially serve as the guest of Xindu Mountain, and he will get a treasure from the mountain that can be used to repair the sword's heart and warm the soul, a magic treasure rank. It's just that he didn't take this kind of beautiful words seriously, and Yamazawa Yishio was a little good, but he knew how to recognize counsel. It's just that there is another addition which really moved his heart. It has nothing to do with money. The surname Cui said he knew a few sword repairmen from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and he could help introduce 1 or 2 in the future. Tao Ran was dubious. Of course he doubted more. Because if I remember correctly, Tong Yezhou had gone to Jianqi Great Wall to practice sword repair, and it seemed that there was only one sword repair named Master Wang. Like himself, he was born in the nasty Shanzhuaishio, and his opponent is the Great Wall of Jianqi in the Golden Core realm. Although it was a golden pill when he left and a golden pill when he returned, Tao Ran was willing to admire him sincerely because he dared to go to the Great Wall of Xianxia alone and was willing to be on the battlefield. However, this guy had a brain cramp and he went to Tonggizong to serve as the ancestors' hall. He changed from a mountain hero to a mountain dog and it was just a mistake. Tao Ran's current situation was also a self-seeking fate. He killed a little monster of the Golden Core realm, but the opponent was too big, but was soon seriously injured by an old beast servant, and he flew with his life. The sword was wounded at that time and it was terrible to watch. When stitched up, it would definitely be a bottomless pit that would cost a lot of money. In fact, there was a lot of gunpowder back then, so where wasn't the battlefield with great disparity in strength the one-sided massacre? Countless capitals, companion capitals, prefectures and counties were swept by the monster army. This sword repairer who was born in Xianxia resisted it. It was my business. In the end, it was just because of a small matter, maybe I was cramped in my mind, anyway I finally couldn't hold it back. No way, it's a bit painful, I always don't have a long memory after eating it again and again. I've been like this bird in my life and I can't change it. Never thought in the end only Jiang Shangzhen, who originally disgusted him most, was considered a man. Do you need a reason to scold Jiang Shangzhen? No need. Besides, he really had several reasons. For example, the two mountain fairies he admired in his early years were both arched by the same pig. As the patriarch of the Jiang family in the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, Tao Ran cursed so happily, that is, his level is low and he can't beat the opponent, otherwise he would have to curse in person. But as the old master of Yu Guizhong, Tao Ran really couldn't criticize what Jiang Shangzhen did. So the master Cui, before leaving the ferry, blew a cowhide bigger than the sky with himself. It is said that as long as you become a registered guest of Xindu Mountain in your own family, you will even scold that Jiang in person in the future. The surname is G for the coffin and the coffin the hanging alpha. So Tao Ran is alone now, helping people to guard the family business. In this way he is only slightly better than Master Wang and he is a watchdog, but since Xindu Mountain has no reputation, how can he be better than that? Tongyizong is fine. As for when the construction will officially start and the construction of this ferry will continue, Master Zhou Xian said that it will wait until next year, and vowed that a bunch of want to grab business and make trouble with themselves. Waiting, I merged it back. The boy in white shook his snow-white sleeves, waved his big hand and drew a big circle. When it comes to this, it will be a scene of two ferry crossings in one country. Habits are good, he's a ferry owner with a mouthful of mouthfuls. Fortunately, that nascent soul stage cultivation base is true. Qin Pingon laughed with a heartfelt voice. We are all from Xindu Mountain. Tao Ran was stunned, or half of his family. Hearing that the other party was from Xindu Mountain, Tao Ran was a little curious. This was the first Xindu Mountain clan Tao Ran had ever seen outside of Master Cui. How come you don't look like a cultivator but a pure swordsman? But it seemed that it was much more serious and normal than that Cui Xianxia. Could it be Cui Lao Yuanying's disciple and grandson? After all, the monks on the mountain tend to look at the younger the higher the realm and the older they are. The other party introduced himself with a smile. My last name is Chen, my name is Pinyin, and I am Mr. Cui Dongshan. Good guy, another one who doesn't speak well. Isn't the family not entering the house? An old fairy in the nascent soul realm? Anyway, change to a more decent title such as Master? Preachers? Why don't you just say that you are the Qin Pingon from Aquarius? Lao Tzu really wanted to hold down the heads of these proud sons and young sword immortals in the upper 5 realms, and ask them where the real realm came from. Little Aquarius Island, a big place, a land of one continent. Unexpectedly within a short jiazi, 3 kendo wizards appeared one after another: Fengxue Temple Wei and Jin Longquan Jianzong Lu Xianyang Luopashenchen Pingon. It seems they are all in the Yupu realm in their 40s. Damn, when I was 2 years old, these young sword fairies were still playing in the mud in open crotch pants. The green shirt is in front of him with double knives on one side of his waist. Either a pure martial artist. Either these 2 narrow knives are magic knives cast by the mountain immortal master. Qin Pingon sat at the table, picked up a bowl of wine, took a sip and smiled. I heard from my student that your name is Tao Ran, you are a golden sword immortal. Tao Ran squatted aside busy stewing fish and said casually, it's just in the golden core realm, it's a sword immortal. Qin Pingon smiled and asked, could you ask how did you hurt your natal Feijian? Tao Ran said in a huff, put yourself on the ground, will you answer? Qin Pingon smiled and nodded and said, it makes sense. In the future we will look for opportunities to drink a few more drinks and we will talk later. Tao Ran sneered and said, "Don't come to this set. I'm not familiar with you. I'm eating rice with you in Xindu Mountain. I can't urinate in a pot with a pure martial artist." Qin Pingon smiled and turned his head to look at the big river. According to the master's thus interpretation and explanation of characters, Lao Huai made a fire, condensing fat into smelt. Tao Ran saw that the guy seemed to be waiting for a free meal of stewed fish. Jian Xiu's expression became more unhappy, frowned and said dully, "It's okay to drink, don't think about eating." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Tao Jianxian doesn't seem to have been born in a casual cultivator at all." Tao Ran turned his head and said, "Can you shut up?" Qin Pingon raised the wine bowl in his hand, of course. Xiao Imo asked with a smile, "Tao Jianxian, would you like me to help?" Tao Ran said impatiently, "Climb away." Xiao Imo smiled and nodded, and his son also lifted the wine bowl in his hand. "All right." Tao Ran looked at the group of people from the corner of his eye, annoying, and his temper was okay. "If you look back, go to Mr. Cui to file a complaint, put on small shoes for yourself and chew your tongue behind your back. I won't be a shit." In the end, Tao Ran, who was cooking rice and stewed fish, squatted not far away and started eating by himself. Qin Pingon put down the empty wine bowl and said, "Tao Jianxian, the is a little less and the cinnamon is a little too much." Tao Ran grinned, a bit interesting. This sentence is fairly easy to hear. Qin Pingon didn't plan to wait here to meet Xiao Poxian and Meng Long's master and servant. Standing up to say goodbye, Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Looking back on the side of Xindu Mountain, I would like you to have a real fish stew." Tao Ran rolled his eyes. Seeing the guy who claimed to be Qin Pingon said to leave, the sword repairman hesitated and asked, "Which Qin Pingon can't be the one from Aquarius Island, Luapa Mountain, right?" I never thought that the swordsman in the green shirt would even smile and nod his head. "If there is no accident, I will be it." Tao Ran was dull and speechless, then tugged at the corner of his mouth, turned his head and snorted. Fortunately, the group of people turned away in a flash. Returning all the way north, I stopped in the Daquan dynasty on the way, and stayed at the Xinjia Inn named Taoyuan Bai at Tayedu in the land of Jiangyi. After spending Qin Pingan's 2 small summer dollars, this is still only the 2 smallest houses, which is only slightly better than a single room. In the inn, there are also some Fulu beauties in the old Shui building Yin Zhai, that were bought by immortals outside of Yezigang. They are now one of the golden signs of Taoyuan's other businesses. Moreover, according to Master Fu Yin's gossip, the proprietress behind this Taoyuan business is still one of the vice critics of the Rouge List, and the ranking is not low. Guests staying here will give away a gift box for free when they leave the inn, which contains a peach symbol, several peach blossom papers and a peach blossom fan. In fact, when added together it will be more than a dozen snowflakes. Money, but the meaning is not small. Spend a lot of money, have lived in Taoyuan, and it's always hard to yell at others so you fall behind, but when you go out you may have a peach charm hanging from your waist or you will be holding a peach blossom fan. At the time, write on the peach blossom paper. When outsiders saw it, they all understood. It is indeed a rich man who has lived in Taoyuan. If you are staying in a single-family house, there are 2 pocket peachwood swords to be given away, which can be used for more purposes. It can be used as a delicate pendant for the peach blossom fan, and the female fairy can also be used as a hairpin for a bun. For example, Mr. Yuan on the Peijiang cruise ship was such a rich man. In Beipingzu you must have drunk fermented from Changchun Palace, and Tonggi's Hao must have lived in Taoyuan. This is the real business. The reason for being so lavish is that Qin Pingon asked Cui Dongshan to help make an appointment with someone who would meet here in secret. The chief of Jindingwan worships the reed eagle. Lu Ying mistakenly thought him as a savage co-owner. This veteran infant who has mastered a kind of tasteless, ancient divine Taoist art, is also an individual talent. It can be compared with the fairy Yunya in the Jiuzhen Immortal Hall. One who firmly believes that everyone is drunk and I wake up alone, and regards him as the lord of Baidi City. One was determined, thinking that Qin Pingon was the incarnation of the wild world. They are all mountain wizards who are difficult to find with lanterns. In Qin Pingan's mind, they are only slightly inferior to Xingyang Mountain's conscientious and conscientious genius brother. Qin Pingon looked at the freshly released Zhongtu newspaper and sighed. Does the Shanhaizong of the Middle-earth divine continent have any hatred with him? It is worthy of Taoyuan's other career, and the news is more well-informed than the average sect candidate Hilltop. That's right, the native monks of Tonggi's Hao How can they have the spare money and idle time, go to collect the divine reports of the divine continent of the earth, at most understand the movement of the mountains in Aquarius and Beiju Luzhou? What's more, everyone knows what Tongyi's his wind is now. Why bother to blame yourself and spend money to buy it? I turned to look at several Xianxia mansion newspapers on local hills. The most extensive one is the Washington Rouge list in Yunkus Blessed Land with 2 comments on it. First, the deputy, the commentary women, there are Dequan Empress Yao Jinji, Beilongdong Cave Master Su Qingzhu, and the daughter of the Wanyao sect master of Sanshan Fudi Han Jiangshu. On the vice comment there is Xianxia Linghu Banana Fish, a female crown at Jindingguan, the princess of the Yu dynasty and a female heroine from the rivers and lakes. Regrettably, the women who have not been selected for the positive review have nothing to do with themselves, but the men who admire them will definitely have to spend their money, and they must also compete for the top rankings for their favorite women in the sub-evaluation. For example, one of the Xianxia newspapers specifically wrote about a romantic affair. There is a new dynasty that is very upright. A young official in the household department, who is not an ordinary brave small 5-rank official, dare to embezzle the treasury privately, and he converts all 3 million taels of silver into it. The immortal money was thrown to the sacred mountain of flowers in the blessed land of Jiang's cloud cave. For this reason I lost the official and I almost lost my head. The reason was that the family smashed the pot and sold the iron. The father, who was a scholar of the criminal ministry and a late son, then borrowed money from friends and credited the bank. Anyway, it can be used. All the methods have been used and all the favors that can be owed are owed, and this has made up most of the deficit. The young man was fine with a few entourages riding in a carriage with a seal carved by himself hanging from his waist, and the bottom of the seal carved 3 characters, a household. There is no place to stay here, but there is a place to keep him, so I can go for a tour of mountains and rivers. On the way to the Qingping Peak together, Cui Dongshan talked to her husband about this interesting event. He also said that he was taking a break and watched a good show over there. It turned out that the young man's father couldn't stop life and death. His face was blue with anger, his lips trembled, and he threw his teacup on the spot in the study, taking a mouthful of improper son, rebellious son, evil son. The ears didn't hurt even after being scolded. The young man still left home and went out of Beijing. Anyway, he wouldn't go to the fairy that he liked, so he didn't have to meet him. Just ask for justice in the matter of throwing money. This is called celebrity romance. The picture is greedy, but it is indecent. It's definitely not what my generation is romantic and handsome. Besides, one's own appearance, whether you follow your father or your mother, is really stunned. It is estimated that if you go to see the fairy, you will have to shut your door. Why bother? It's better to leave a good thought for yourself. It didn't take long for him to leave the capital and he returned to Beijing. He made a fortune, made up for the deficit in the treasury, and was promoted to become a minister of the Ministry of Industry. It turned out that I met a congenial fellow on the way. The other party claimed to have a surname Zhou. He was a foreigner from Aquarius Island. He was a half-hearted monk who was not worth mentioning. It didn't take long for Yizhou. Unexpectedly, it was as if he was immediately slapped in the head. He was disoriented and dizzy. After seeing his feet, he suddenly changed his impression of Tong Yezhou. In the end, 3 immortal coins that had never been seen before were left. The young man returned to Beijing and asked about it again, only to realize that it was the most valuable Zhou Xian in the legend. Brother Zhou also left a letter with sincere words. It wasn't that a friend couldn't say such a thing. In the past 20 years, how insignificant he was and how foolish he was. Would he praise him for his handsome appearance? This letter is different. Instead, it allows him to be an official and show his fists in his official career. Anyway, he is not greedy for money. It is better to be an upright official, lying down with his ancestors' merit book and enjoying the blessing. Do you still need to learn to have fun? Need someone to teach you a lot of money? On the contrary, if it is done for you, it is the work that suffers from hardship, and then it can be regarded as the first-class romantic boy in the world. The young man saw it all at once, and it was much more useful than his father's whispering in his ears for more than 20 years. When he was a noble but not serious servant of the Ministry of Rights, he was a fart for the benefit of the party, and if he wanted to, he was a worker of the Ministry of Industry, so his father began to yell at the wicked son and the wicked son. As a result, he really went to the Ministry of Industry as an errand, only to know that if he didn't go secretly fishing for oil and water, His life would be so harsh and his official duties would be heavy. In addition, he had a hot mind and took the initiative to live up his body. He took a trip to the local state and county. With calluses on his hands and feet, every day I fall asleep when I'm tired. What else do I miss? I was so tired that I didn't even have a spring dream. The young people only feel that the good days of more than 2 decades have even returned their profits. As a result, when he returned to the capital, his old father waited for a long time at the door with a clear eye. He really waited for his son to return home from the Ministry of Industry's yamen. The scholar of Xianxia saw the carriage and immediately went back to the study, sat down tightly and waited until the old man watched. The son who lost a lot of weight without seeing him for a month, he didn't throw the teacup again. He was silent for a long time, and when he spoke he was still the old tune, evil son. In fact, the young man felt extremely bitter. Originally, when he returned to Beijing this time, he wanted to retreat. If you go to the Ministry of Rights or return to the Ministry of Households, you can be a Lang official. The servant of the Ministry of Industry is really not a personal job. Only when the day was over, the young attendant looked at the father in the distance. He was obviously gray-haired and croaked, but he was full of breath, laughing loudly with his colleagues. The young servant told himself silently, why would he have to spend another year and a half in the Ministry of Engineering? This shows that Sovereign Chui is busy and he is also free when he is free. The reason why Qin Pingon would have said from the bottom of his heart with Liang Shuang, the phoenix tree is really unwilling to thank you, and the number of leaves is still audible. In addition to talking about the young sword repairman of Tonggizong, it is also talking about such young people under the mountain. A house in Taoyuan. Some people are desperate right now. If the opponent doesn't come, it's like a sword hanging over his head and it will not fall, but the opponent is really coming and he doesn't know how to deal with it. It always feels like he can't compete with his own scheming. Having to be alone, fidgeting, the old monk lamented. Again, without knowing it, number of ways. Someone appeared behind Lu Ying, stretched out a hand and gently pressed the old Yuanying's shoulder. Chief Lu, meet again. As for the doorway, it was the young woman with a ball in a bun, arms around her chest, leaning against the door. The man behind him smiled and said, Chief Lu, so uneasy, isn't he going to take my head and go to the Chinese temple of Confucianism to claim credit? Frightened Lu Ying jumped up and said with a wry smile, Firen Sword Fairy, don't scare me anymore. I am from Xianxia and I am not as courageous as a master of genealogy. Lu Ying suddenly realized that he had failed and slapped himself severely, changed his name and said with a flattering smile, I have seen Chao Keqing. Qin Pingon moved a chair and sat on the opposite side of the reed eagle. He raised his palm, pressed twice, raised Erlang's legs and took out the dry tobacco rod and pipe. Lu Ying asked cautiously, Chao Keqing, is there any order to summon the younger one this time? Last time I met, this guy in front of me reported a series of identity names. What is the second-class worship of the Jiang family in Yunku, the second-class guest of Yuguazong Jiaifeng, and the third-class guest of Shenzhufeng Zushitang? The name is there is only one Chao Mo. However, when they met again today, in addition to 2 more narrow knives around their waist, they also smoked dry smoke. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Lu Jifeng chose to go out at noon this time, right? Lu Ying's face was embarrassed. Last time it was the woman at the door who helped break the secret. Lu Ying realized that there was something in the words, otherwise, something happened sooner or later. Qin Pingon asked, isn't it superfluous? Although the other party's words were dark and unclear, Lu Ying immediately understood. The old Yuanying said that he did not boast, and his disposition and behavior were cautious. He was still a bit higher than Yuanying's realm. Although he stood up, he had already bent down hard. The old monk said cautiously, Chao Keqing just put 100 hearts on it and absolutely will not do anything superfluous. In that golden roof view, a chief enshrines what should be seen and he doesn't fall a glance what shouldn't be said, nothing is said. Did not say. Qin Pingon smiled, sit down and chat. Tell a smart person a certain truth, the other party will be suspicious, far better than let the smart person want to understand the truth, come to believe it firmly. Lu Ying was ordered to take a seat, just sitting on pins and needles. The earth immortals who were born in Xianxia, even if they are just golden cores, are all accustomed to the wind and rain. The tenacity of the Taoist heart and the goodwill, maybe even more than those who were born as a genealogist. It is good. Fortunately, the other party quickly stepped into the subject. When will your Lord Du Guan enter the Yupu realm? Or is it already Yupu? Lu Ying was puzzled. Returning to Chao-Keqing for questioning, I returned to Jinding Temple this time, and Du Hanliang has not shown signs of retreat. From Yuanying to Yupu the movement will not be small. Without thinking about that Firen, he nodded and said, "It's probably Yupu already." Lu Ying thought about it a little and admired it. It was indeed the wild co-owner who had been bold enough to take a slant, but has not been found by the Confucian Temple so far. Amazing. Lu Ying didn't care about the shock and quickly made up for it. Before going down the mountain I had a drink with Yin Miaofeng and didn't say anything about it, but it seems that, with some clues from the Taoist treasury, his disciple Xiao Yuanran is very likely to be right away. Retreat and the certainty of becoming a Yuanying is not small. Yin Miaofeng's master is Yin Miaofeng, who is named the Taoist of Baojing. Both the master and the apprentice were once the royal consecrations of the Daquan dynasty, and they were responsible for helping the Lu imperial court at that time supervise the Yaojiabian army. Qin Pingon nodded, then suddenly squinted his eyes and asked, "Really not superfluous? Chief Lu, how do I think you are designing me?" Lu Ying suppressed the ups and downs of Dao's heart, shrunk his sleeves in one hand, and clenched a jade pendant in his hand and said with heart, "Qing Shanchong, don't take the net at this time. When will you wait?" Xiao Mo, who was sitting in the courtyard, couldn't help but was taken care of by his son, and this person was still saved. As far as Lu Ying is concerned, once the Dongchuang incident occurs and the matter is revealed, he is colluding with the wild world. Not to mention the Middle-earth Confucian Temple, the skills of the Xuegong Academy today are very different from the past, that is, the native monk of Tonggizong. When he learns this he will be alive and deprived. Therefore before coming to Tayedu, Lu Ying made up his mind to watch Du Hanliang without the knowledge of Jinding, at a Xianxia ferry, and sent a letter to Feijian secretly. Just wait for that brilliant to throw himself into the net. With bad luck you can also get rid of the relationship between Firen and the wild world. Good luck, that's a great accomplishment. Regardless of whether it is the incarnation of the Yin god or some messy means, as long as you are caught by the Confucian Temple, you may be able to obtain the permission of the Confucian Temple and start a sect. If the snail-shell Taoist mansion of Huanggeji was parted last time, there would be no intersection between the two sides. The big deal is that I will walk my single-plank bridge and continue to walk on your Yangguan Road. If you ignore my reed eagle I will just assume that I have never seen you. Anyway, I didn't do anything about lying. I just babbled a lot of nonsense with you in the Yunku Foodie. Even if Dafu Academy and Zhongtu Confucian Temple were held accountable afterwards, the big deal would be to be arrested in that meritorious forest and red sages for several years. Maybe I can still see that Lucha. It's just that the jade medal of Academy in the sleeve, there is no slight movement, my heart and words are like a mud cow into the sea. The reed eagle instantly fell into an ice cave. Fuck. There was no response from Dafu Academy and Qing Longzhou. Is it possible to cross the river and demolish the bridge? Are you planning to smash yourself with Firen first? To smash an egg in death is a death. Lao Tzu is a tattered nascent infant, who hurt the other side the slightest. You scholars of dog days full of sage's doctrine, turned out to have a bad stomach, which is worse than the casual cultivation of our wild dogs. Is it just a flash of inspiration, or is it that Qing Longzhou, who was born in the old Jiao Academy, is actually a wonderful dark chess in front of him? Lu Ying was in a complicated mood for a while, dull and speechless, except that he would definitely not be able to eat. Could it be that the seemingly looking continents of mountains and rivers in your hometown will repeat the same mistakes sooner or later? Lu Ying felt that his current life as a cultivator was actually not bad. Although he kept bumping and bumping, he could always avoid some catastrophes. In any case, this hard-won world is peaceful. Pretty good. Is it going to be gone again? Qin Pingon smiled and said, whether it is because of the enthusiasm to be a hero or because of selfishness just wanting to protect and save oneself, Monk Lu Ying from Tonggizhou, after all, did something. Xiao Mo, who was sitting on the courtyard steps, said with a heartfelt smile, "This old monk is a little sad." Pei Qian gathered the sound into a thread and said to the master, "Lu Ying's heart is in love, there is a moment of sight, and there is a woman with a fuzzy face." On the way here, Qin Pingon had already passed the sword house of the Fengyuan ferry. Feijian sent a letter and said 3 things to Dafu Academy. Luapa Mountain will establish its next sect in the beginning of next year. It will invite Xiyuanshan Chongqing Dragon Boat to watch the ceremony. Then it will ask Zhong Kuei's method of passing letters. Finally, if Jindingwen enshrines the reed eagle, it will secretly pass on Dafu College, saying that he is a wonderful college. You can record this incident as usual, but you don't need to mobilize people to come to Tayedu to encircle and suppress it. Luing was confused. He is a kind person, but now that he is older and has a higher realm, he wants to be stable. For example, just saying that after becoming the chief consecration of Jinding Temple, traveling abroad, willingly recommending herself as a female nun on the pillow seat, or wanting to change Menting to recognize him as a master, or even a godfather, they can't count them. But for so many years, the two women who wanted the most, one was Huang Ting of Taiping Mountain, a young madwoman, and the ancestor of the woman in Yezigang who caused the catastrophe, and now the entire Tongyi's Hao is scolding a dead person to death. It's just that instead of scolding her, Lu Ying made a special trip to the Yezigang site, squatting and drinking among the ruins over there, muttering to herself, "Because you are a master of genealogy, you are a master of genealogy, you are a little stupid, so stupid, but you are a good person." After smashing a pot of wine to the ground, this infamous old Yuan Ying finally squeezed out an unscrupulous smile. He laughed. Back then he wanted to take advantage of most of Yezigang's grandparents to go to Yugui. Zong participated in a grand opening ceremony. Wei Ying entered the Lord God Seal Peak, a big deal. Lu Ying planned to come to Shi Tower here to steal some talismans, but as a result Before the old Yuan Ying left the ruins, he said one last thing. "Ah, unexpected joy, I accidentally peeked at your beauty out of the bath, but I missed it and I missed my neck and I found my whereabouts. Otherwise I will remember you now a bit more real." Ripples and water mist rose, and an elegant old man with a high crown and a botanical belt appeared out of thin air. It was the mountain leader Qing Longzhou of the Dafu Academy, the former Huang Tingwa Old Jiao, and the deputy mountain leader of the Piyun Mountain Linlu Academy. Qin Pingon put away the dry tobacco rod, got up and bowed to the head of the college. Qing Longzhou returned the gift. If Qin Pingon is just the young mountain owner of Luopa Mountain and receives the secret letter from Lu Ying, even if Qin Pings is still Wen Sheng's close disciple, Qing Longzhou still dare not take it lightly. But this young sword fairy still has an identity, so Qing Longzhou just came alone this time. However, the academy will still record the matter secretly, as Qin Pingon said in the letter. And Qing Longzhou has also sent a letter to the Chinese Civil Confucian Temple in the first place, and reported the matter 1510. Seeing the old man with a high crown belt and a jade pendant hanging from his waist, Lu Ying was completely confused. What was it going on? Qing Longzhou laughed and said, "Smartness is wronged by cleverness. The Chawamo in front of you is not so impressive at all. Of course, you can continue to misunderstand. For example, I'm from a monster clan, so I have been in collusion with this Fei Ran. You shouldn't do it forever, and you shouldn't send a letter to Dafu Academy." Lu Ying's face was embarrassed. "Even if I can't believe in myself, I can still trust the eyes of the Chinese Temple of Confucius. There are the most holy masters, and there are holy saints with courtesy saints, not to mention that there is a new literary saint now." Qing Longzhou lost a copy of Xianxia Mansion and reported it to Lu Ying. "Look at it for yourself, the answer is on the top." Lu Ying tossed over and over again for fear of missing a word, only read it twice and didn't want to understand what the master of the academy, what is it for Lao Tzu to see? There is nothing to say about Chawamo. If you say that Chawamo is a pseudonym, what is it, not from the savage world but from Yugizong's great sword immortal Wei Ying? That's why I walked side by side with Kong Sangjin. Otherwise, it's the outsider from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Qin Pingon interrupted the fairy hairpin city in the wild world, dragged down the river with the throne great demon Fei Fei, then evacuated Tuyue Mountain, and finally killed an ascending sword repairer Tuyue Mountain great ancestor? So, I immediately knelt down and knocked his head a few times. Anyway, it was a good talk. Qing Longzhou said, "Although Chawamo is not brilliant, but you did not choose to collude with what you mistakenly thought of as wild and brilliant. Instead, you were involved in danger in revealing the secret. Dafu Academy will record it in the book and will not publish it to the public. You will only need this credit in the future. At that time, for example, it can be used to make up for the demerits, but the ugly words are at the front and there are some mistakes, and it is certain that the merits and demerits cannot be offset." Lu Ying hurriedly pretended to be polite and thanked Qing Shanchong. Qin Pingon accompanied Qing Longzhou to the courtyard, and the head of the academy was in a mixed mood. When the two parties met for the first time that year, the other party was still a young man holding a hatchet and wearing straw sandals. He looked like a piece of black charcoal, but although the young man looked thin, he gave a sense of strength and sharpness, which can be regarded as the outer circle and the inner square. Qing Longzhou smiled and said, "It's really not easy to get to this day." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It's all the same." The old man spread out his palms, and the old scholar who was no longer Wen Xing gave a golden text. "It's like a riddle. Volt. The dormant state is also the current state of the Dafu Academy." Qin Pingon asked, "Yang Pu of Dafu Academy is not a sage now?" At the Taiping mountain site, Yang Pu, a scholar of the academy, stayed at the gate of the mountain for 3 full years. Not to mention the fact that he was blinded, it was tantamount to enmity with multiple mountain forces. Moreover, Yang Pu didn't get the instruction of the academy, it was just a brainstorm. I didn't care about it and went to the Taiping mountain to watch the door. At that time the head of the Dafu Academy was still vacant. Qing Longzhou took office only after Yang Pu stayed there for a while, and then the academy really began to support Yang Pu. At the gate of Taiping Mountain, Qin Pingon confronted a golden pill, a yuanying, a jade and a fairy one after another. The disciple of Tuyueshan Grand Ancestor's Gate was Liz Hen, and the fairy Han Yushu of Wanyao sect of Sanshan Fudi. These two are both first-class rich men. These two matches were also the most rewarding after Qin Pingon finished the fight. Not to mention that, half of the boxing score. Because that sect Master Han had received a punch from the 11th realm martial artist. "It's already," Qing Longzhou said with a smile. "This stinky boy just became a sage, so he began to ask me how to be a gentleman. The reason is very good. It is said that Sovereign Jiang once promised something personally. One day when he becomes a gentleman it will be fine. I made an appointment with Lord Qinshan for a drink, and I made an appointment at Dafu Academy." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "This is the truth." Qing Longzhou said, "I have already contacted Zhong Kue and asked him to go directly to Xindu Mountain to find you." Qin Pingon folded his fists and thanked him. Qing Longzhou waved his hand with a smile and disappeared in a flash. After confirming that Qing Shanchong had left, Lu Ying dared to leave the house. "I was really afraid that this unfavorable fellow would come to settle accounts after an autumn. The opponent is not brilliant but better than brilliant. It's no wonder that at the beginning, one bite of the grandson of greatness. Those who dare to say such things in the world and those who are suitable to say are looking for them. Really there is only the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, right?" Seeing the back of the green shirt, he was sitting on the steps and began to vomit again. Lu Ying had no choice but to step forward, landing directly at the bottom of the steps and then seated again. Qin Pingon took out the dry tobacco rod and knocked it, replaced it with tobacco and asked, "Have you been to Yezigang?" Lu Ying was surprised and then just nodded silently. "There are so many beauties in the world, I never thought of it, but still thinking of the woman who was just a glimpse of it. Naturally I can't talk about how much I like it. Earlier it was just a man who was greedy, but now it is just a touch of melancholy, lingering, hard to let go, and it seems that there is no reason to say." Qin Pingon asked, "Lu Ying, what do you think about it?" Lu Ying said without hesitation, "If I were the monk of the Zushitang in Yezigang and if she was there again when she was so obsessed with the door to accept refugees, I would definitely slap her directly on her face. Lao Tzu would not wake her up. Can't you wake her up?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "If I remember correctly she is Yupu realm and Chief Lu is just a Yuaning. It's hard to say who beats who." Lu Ying nodded, "That's right. When the auntie was alive she was very fierce. Of course, compared to the young female champion sword repairer in Tapingshan, she was still a bit better." Two pairs became silent. Lu Ying asked tentatively, "Qin Jianxian, are you really that hidden official? This kind of thing, no matter how true it is, still makes people feel incredible." A foreigner from Aquarius, according to the calculation when he arrived at the Great Wall of Jianqi, the man next to him was still a young man at the time. How could he become such a big official of the Great Wall of Jianqi? Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Otherwise." Lu Ying began to formulate his words and slowly said, "His master, before I came to Tiedu I was on the Jindingguan side. Not long ago I turned to a Shanshuodi newspaper from Ai's Hao and said that the 2 printed books are correct. It's from the handwriting of Master Hermit, so can you give me a printed sheet? Of course if it's a seal it would be even better. I must cherish it and become a family heirloom, although I haven't had an official mountain Taoist companion so far." There are no children for the time being, but this kind of thing a little harder. After all, it is not difficult. Lu Ying rushed to join Huang Ting as a Taoist companion, but it turned out to be better, almost hacking himself to death. The problem is that the little lady, who is not authentic, does not say that she is from Taiping Mountain before the fight and during the fight. If he had known the other party's identity, Lu Ying would not provoke Huang Ting and would leave when he saw her. If he walked slowly, he would treat him as a brainless. At that time, Tong Yezhou was recognized as a person who should not provoke the monks of Taiping Mountain. Although the descendants of the immortal family born by the Taoist priest in the mountains may not necessarily be successful, as long as they can practice independently without the money of the gods, they are often qualified beyond ordinary people. For example, the Linghu banana fish of Xianxia, the direct disciple Ma Linshi of Su Qingzhu in Beilongdong, and their grandson Youqi, who is the master of the law, all have excellent cultivating aptitudes. As a result, while speaking, Lu Ying found Lord Hidden Officer squinting her eyes. Lu Ying shut up immediately. Got it, flattering hooves. Isn't this a flattery trying to find a tricky angle? With the distinguished status of this hidden official, would he be short of those ordinary skills? Seems that I was wrong. After receiving Xiao Mo's heartfelt words, Qin Pingan stood up, lifted the dry tobacco rod in his hand, pointed in the air with the smoke and condensed the 12 characters, "I think it is for you." It turned out that Lord Fu Yin Yao Xinji came here again. At the Qin Pingan's house, Yao Xinji smiled when he met. "Your Majesty has already agreed. We Daquan dynasty can partner with Xian Dushan for the sale of chicken distance pen." In fact, it was not said at the beginning. In the early morning of one morning after retiring from the court, His Majesty went out of the palace. When she arrived at Yao Mansion after talking to her grandfather, she found Yao Xinji, who was waiting at the door. In fact, His Majesty, when she heard about it, she refused it without hesitation, and her face was not so pretty, but for some reason before returning to the palace, she changed her words and said it was feasible. His Majesty rubbed his eyebrows and added another sentence, saying that the treasury was short of money. But for these family matters, Yao Xinji won't say much to Mr. Qin. His Majesty the Emperor is a woman after all, and a woman's heart is a needle in the sea. He is a rough man, how guess he is not Mr. Qin. As for the reed eagle in the house elsewhere, he read the texts of smoke that gradually dissipated and read it twice. The old monk felt meaningful from the bottom of his heart. After a moment of silence, he suddenly slapped his knees and exclaimed, "Jingxi respects things to be alert to the world, and ceases to cultivate to the cultivation of the Tao." After returning to Xindu Mountain, Qin Pingan continued to travel north, leaving Chao Sunny with only Pei Qian and Xiao Mo as a guest. Xiao Longqiu. Xianxia is not far from Xindu Mountain, and can barely be regarded as a neighbor on the mountain. Distant relatives are not as good as neighbors, how can we not have a familiar face? Huang Ting, the crown female champion of Taiping Mountain, who met for the first time in the blessed land of lotus roots, is now cultivating on the edge of the ancestor hall of another family. In fact, there is a mountain friend on the side of Xiao Longqiu who has never met. It was Zhang Luzhu, one of the two gods at the gate of Taiping Mountain, Xiao Longqiu's chief guest. Lao Yuanying is proficient in water law, obviously quite arrogant about it, as can be seen from his Taoist name, Narcissus. Like Lu Ying, he was born in Yeshio, did not take refuge to the colorful world, but changed his body and followed Lu Ying's climbing way, becoming a genealogical immortal master. According to Chief Shou, all kinds of goods can now run up the mountain. From the early days of the mountain, who was shouting and screaming for death, Shanzhou Yeshio has become the mainstay, backbone and top pillar of a continent. When the two sides fought against each other, the old Yuan Ying almost missed the enemy's face and was split in half. Later he was detained and taken to the gate of the mountain, where his soul was stripped out and hung above his head, with waves of pain that slapped Daoxin like a tide. Moreover, that unfamiliar mountain monk had a temperament. It was hard to say a word. Just like that, he lifted his foot and stepped a female cultivator of Yupu realm who was the arrogant girl of heaven, cursing, and then stepping on a big hole, and the woman's head was gone. Unlike the Jindan Dixian from the Yu dynasty, this old Yuan Ying, who is now extremely noble, was sent away by Jiang Shangzhen from the Taiping Mountain at that time. A nightmare. After making the old Yuan Ying return to Xianxia, he didn't dare to say what happened there, but was vague, saying that he would fight against others. He was invincible and he was injured. Huang Ting is easy to find. She is at the wishful tip of Xiaolongqiuzu Mountain. Qin Pingan walked into that simple hut. The young female crown was eating corn, and there was still a lot in the brazier. "You're welcome." Qin Pingan sat on a stool, bent down to pick up a corn and said straight to the point, "Huang Ting, do you need fairy money? We have a lot of surplus in the Luopa Mountain treasury. Here is the Xindu Mountain Shazung. You won't ask for money from Luopashan, so you won't delay doing business. Anyway, it's like a figure lying on your account book. If you really feel sorry for it, we can count interest." Tapingshan ruins. The mountains and rivers are broken, thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. The aura is as thin as the wind fluttering in the wind. The reconstruction of the matter, in addition to the money, it is hard to rely on the gods' money to supplement the lack of aura in the world. Before this, it is necessary to establish a large formation, and to attract a large number of landscape gods to build golden statues, build temples, fill in the vacancies, and help gather the spiritual energy so that it will not be dissipated rapidly, otherwise it will only be a wedding dress for others. According to Jiang Shengzhen's rough estimation, if a new Taiping mountain wants to restore the landscape and climate to 30% of the scale of the former Zhongmen Peak in 200 to 300 years, at least 3,000 to 4,000 grains of grain will be needed. In addition, all kinds of messy human relations, the relationship between neighbors on the mountain, and the business dealings of the dynasty under the mountain, arranged dozens of landscape temples and temples at the fastest speed to help the various gods in the jurisdiction to obtain the imperial court. Qin Pingan knows the hardships here. Especially in Taiping Mountain, now only Huang Ting is left. Unlike her own Luopa Mountain, even in the early days of its founding, there was Zhou Xian as the chief steward in the mountain. Besides, next door was the unreliable mountain monarch Weibo, and there was a Piyun Mountain that was almost equivalent to wearing a pair of trousers with Luopa Mountain. Huang Ting shook his head and said, "I don't need it for the time being. I still have some possessions which can be converted into a lot of fairy money. If I am really short of money someday, I won't be polite to you, the rich man." Qin Pingan nodded. "I cultivated myself in the Taiping Mountains, and the Patriarch Church continued the incense. Previously there, Qin Pingan planned to defend the Taiping Mountain for the Taiping Mountain within 80 years. The Xianxia at the feet of both parties is the next sect of Dalongqiu in the Middle-earth Divine Continent, which is actually down the mountain to be precise. In fact, it wasn't just the two aquatic spirits who were professed to be great saints and kings who migrated back then. They just learned the same way as the master Xianxia. However, King Jingshan Qinghu Palace moved to Aquarius Island, where he still made contributions, while Xianxia crossed the sea and claimed to have found a mysterious landscape. Moving was relatively fast back then, but it was not too slow to go home later. Then I hit the Tapingshan site and planned to move to the ancestral hall after entering the sect, and then cast an ancient moon mirror that imitated the Tapingshan. And the great dragon Qiu of the Middle-earth sect is a well-deserved ancestor head immortal family. The ancestors of the ancestor of the ancestor are all mirror workers on the mountain. The mirrors cast by the immortal masters, of which the two highest rank mirrors, are named respectively Stop the Moon and Stop the Water, magical and mysterious, have always been rare and valuable treasures with no market. The cultivators traveled through mountains and rivers, and most of them carried a few similar objects: a picture of the mountain search, a mirror of the demon, and a stack of landscape-breaking charms. It's just like the people in the rivers and lakes rushing outside, there must be gold and silver, and the fire is similar. While in the process of refining the mirror under heaven, there are 6 channels with a clear division of labor. Daong Qiu Jinggong monopolizes one of them. Casting the mirror can best defeat the waterborne spirits, and the mirror in the same vein as chasing the mountain. In the mountains, the demand is the most, so Dalongqia's financial resources are so abundant that it is difficult not to make money. Howren monks from all walks of life in the world put on a pole to give money. In other continents, the sects that partnered with Dalongqiu to buy and sell treasure mirrors included Tianyu Dongtian in Luxiazu and Kaiyong Glinzong in Luzhou and Beiju. It's just that the precious mirrors sold by the former are of high rank and expensive, and they will be discouraged if they are not a monk or a direct disciple of the sect. Qiong Linzong only peddled the most introductory Dragon Qiuzhao demon mirror, even if it is in the lower 5 realms, and gritted his teeth he can start with a treasure mirror. Different from Pushun and Beilongdong, Xianxia, who is also a candidate for the sect, did not participate in the huge Peach and Leaf alliance. Huang Ting was silent for a moment, smiling and jokingly said, I saw Ning Yao, his realm is very high. If he is higher it would really be a bit unreasonable. Pretty. That's it. Qin Pingon smiled, nibbling on the corn, and said straightforwardly, Ning Yao is the best looking in my eyes anyway. Huang Ting said, Is there anything else? Qin Pingon nodded and said vaguely, I plan to invite you to serve as the guest of the next sect. If you have another idea, it depends on what you mean. Huang Ting said, Talk about it. Qin Pingon said, I want to serve as your worship to Taiping Mountain by name. Huang Ting laughed and said, What's embarrassing about this? That's all, but I have to be the chief guest of your next clan. Qin Pingon nodded, No problem. This is the second time that Qin Pingon has served in another mountain in addition to serving as the anonymous guest of the Lu family in AI Zhou. Rather, it is directly worship, not even a named guest. Qin Pingon suddenly said, If you are not suitable for Shuang Express Sword, I can kill him and I must be unaware of it. Huang Ting looked at the man in the blue shirt, expressionless and indifferent, and he had a calm expression. Huang Ting stared at the guy in a daze. She shook her head for a long time and said softly, Farewell anyway. Qin Pingon gave a hum and then continued to gnaw corn. After eating the corn in his hand, Qin Pingon got up and said goodbye, saying that he would go and visit Xianxia casually. Huang Ting smiled and said, I won't give it away. It is Kuqing and worshipped. There are more opportunities to meet. He wore a green shirt and his back was gone. Huang Ting turned her head and glanced at the sword on the wall. She frowned slightly. Strange, I am not afraid of him. You are a sword. What are you afraid of? Back to Qingping Peak of Xindu Mountain again. Qin Pingon found Cui Dongshan, first sacrificed a caged bird, and then asked Cui Dongshan to open the unknown little cave sky that he got from Tianwan, and then followed Cui Dongshan with only Xiaomo into it. In the small cave, Qin Pingon even asked Cui Dongshan to set up another golden thunder pond. At the same time, let Xiao Imo pay attention to whether there are outsiders spying on this place. Cui Dongshan's expression became solemn. This may be the first time for the husband to be so exciting. At the beginning he joined forces to deal with that Wu Shuangjiang in the night ship. The husband may not be as good as today. Qin Pingon sat cross-legged on the top of the mountain with his arms folded. After Cui Dongshan sat down, he asked in his heart, How to deceive the sky by self-deception? Cui Dongshan asked in a deep voice, Sir, do you want it? Qin Pingon said something that made Cui Dongshan feel like falling into the clouds and then shaking his heart. I myself have forgotten. I only know that I must consult you about this method again. The Dali Queen Mother Nanzhan also had similar methods, but it could only be regarded as the most inferior and least influential. Compared with the sky-reaching method Qin Pingon wanted, it was 1,000 miles away. Cui Dongshan remained silent. Qin Pingon began to close his eyes and rest his mind. Cui Dongshan stood up, paced around in a circle and suddenly shook his two snow-white sleeves, bowed his head and looked at it, sighing and sighing. Finally stand still and look into the distance. Back then in the Yuan family ancestor house in Lizhu Cave, the young Cui Yang, reunited with Qi Jingchun and his brothers. Qi Jingchun once asked, intentionally or unintentionally, why you fell from the 12th realm to the nascent soul realm. Half of Cui Yang at that time and Cui Dongshan in the future, thoughts and explanations were not concealed, they were true. Because according to his own understanding, it is Qi Jingchun's learning, which comes from the line of literary sages but can make a difference. But he and that old have been implicated too much. Old scholars' knowledge was banned and the status of the idols dropped again and again, and they were even moved out of the Confucian temple, smashed to pieces. In Cui Dongshan's view it was because Qi Jingchun had gone ashore. But he, the head of the literary saint Cui Yang, it must be broken and then stand, completely abandoning the tradition of inheritance and relying on the knowledge of utility, to make a comeback in the land of a continent, return to the immortal and even enter the ascension realm. Qi Jingchun had another question at the time. That day you and Cui Minghuang were acting out for Wu Yuan to watch, but they were actually showing it to me. Are you tired? Fart your fart, tired of a hammer. It's right for you two to be tired from watching the joke. Because in fact this Qi Jingchun, why didn't he cooperate with his brother Cui Yang to act for the future, senior nephew Cui Dongshan? The key is that the two brothers didn't have any verbal communication and they didn't even need to meet each other. It's just a kind of tacit understanding. Both sides relied on their chess strength, seemingly tit-for-tat everywhere, and the moves were all true, but in fact they ended up playing the same game on the chessboard. Cui Dongshan is so young not because Cui Dongshan pretends but Cui Yang's deliberately. This is only the first level and there is still a second level. Cui Yang has set himself a lot of restrictions and barriers. It is like he is clearly himself. Why is this old richer even more knowledgeable and more powerful? Stronger? Than the 3 words not tired back then. Probably it was Qi Jingchun who was a fellow apprentice, who had a unique word of relief to her fellow apprentice Xiuhu. In that conversation Qi Jingchun looked sad at last, with the softly 3 words as if it were the finale. Brother Cui. When Xing's lineage at that time was still the weird reunion of big brothers and younger brothers. Junior brother Qi Jingchun opened the article with the phrase, "Isn't tired," and ended with a cry of senior brother Cui. At this moment Cui Dongshan put away his thoughts and again raised 2 snow-white sleeves. On the large sleeves of the robe, there is a string of small letters with small letters, which are like water plants and undulating like piaoping. The bird in the cage of the sun and the moon, the heaven and the earth are on the water. Cui Dongshan turned to look at his husband. Qin Pingon opened his eyes with a gentle expression and smiled and said, "Mr. Student, you and I have the same mood in all seasons." Sword of Coming Chapter 897. Cui Dongshan alone took the lead out of the forbidden area of the thunder pond created with golden sword aura. Xiao Mo said, "There are no faults." Cui Dongshan nodded and smiled. "Mr. needs to retreat for a while, we just wait." The white-clothed boy held the back of his head with his hands, and the little Mo in the yellow hat and blue shoes held a green bamboo stick in his arms. Cui Dongshan said in his heart, "Except for the most important thing, Mr. will refining the Jing Zhongyue a little bit to see if they can visualize the maze of heaven and earth, which may be the Xindu mountain outside. It may be the summer palace that does not exist anymore, or it may be the Lizhu cave before the fall in his hometown. The more subtle you understand the maze, the closer you will be to the truth. So if this matter is done, the husband will be equal to letting this natal flying sword is in addition to the quantity, and has mastered the second kind of evolution supernatural power, and it can be more foolproof when combined with the caged sparrow that has become a small world." Xiao Mo was a little confused and asked, "Dare to ask Sect Master Cui, why didn't the sun use Jing Zhongyue to cooperate with the caged bird?" Cui Dongshan laughed blankly. "Everything is difficult at the beginning from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 10 the former is always more difficult to think of and achieve. Besides, I said the Sir's pursuit is the truth not an illusion, so it's already very difficult to make the people things and things evolved from Jing Zhongyue nearly real." Xiao Mo knew it, nodded and said, "In this way, it is indeed tantamount to climbing the sky." Qin Pingan's inspiration came from the discussions in the Qin Turkish Confucian temple, and Li Baoping's gestures, "Tao begets one, one lives two, three begets everything." And later asked the sword with the culprit of Tueshan, the dense corridor created by the latter. Qin Pingon was next to the waterless pond behind the Luapa Mountain bamboo tower, and remembered the Buddhist saying, "Like a lotus without water and like the sun and the moon." Finally, Qin Pingon remembered the prison in the Great Wall of Jianqi. The self-built hanging pavilion in the house. That's why I asked Xiaoma to help protect the road at the Wangxing Flower Hall of the Daquan dynasty. Qin Pingon had 2 attempts. One was with the many rubbings of the Xinhu bookstore and Mita Tueshan. There are thousands of miles of mountains and rivers in the boundary, 1 flower and 1 grass, 1 mountain and 1 house, all of which are all delicate, just trying to flower the success of failing. At that time, after receiving the reminder from the small moor outside the house, Qin Pingon was no longer greedy for big things, just the road. It manifested the growth of a purple lotus seed, but it still gave up on its own initiative before the flowers bloomed. Xiao Mo's eyes lit up, but he stopped talking. Cui Dongshan seemed to have guessed what the other party was thinking and nodded. "You have thought of it and I also thought of it, so the Sir must have thought of it earlier. It's just that this is too costly and it is not the 3 kinds of fairy money. It's the extremely scarce gold and copper coins. Besides, the husband has fallen again. The imminent thing is to heal his injuries and restore his state, so it is mostly because the husband deliberately put it on hold. The four walls of the house are cosmic, and the extreme coverage of the Zhou Yu is also called the universe. Cui Dongshan raised his head to look at the sky, stomped on the ground, put his hands away, shook his sleeves and muttered, "The four directions are called the universe, and the ancient times are called the universe." The number of flying swords in the moon in a well is directly related to the level of the realm. For example, when Qin Pingan and Lu Chen borrowed the 14 realms of Taoism, the questioning sword with the first disciple of Tueshan once evolved in one effort. There are nearly 500,000 flying swords. In fact, this is because Qin Pingan intentionally or unintentionally hidden clumsy. If he did not hesitate to lose his spirit, he would let go of his hands and feet and exert all his strength to show that the rank was close to the peak and close to perfection at the time. Jing Bianyue, or even the moon in the sky, the number of flying swords is estimated to reach an astonishing 800,000. As for the bird in the cage, Qin Pingan, indeed as Cui Dongshan had expected, had long figured out the possibility of the second kind of natal supernatural power, which was related to the long river of time. This is why Qin Pingan traveled recently and learned that Old Man Yang smoked a dry smoke, and even if he didn't adapt, he still bites his scalp and vomits. Every time Old Man Yang is in the backyard of the pharmacy, he smokes dry cigarettes. With this, the roots of the avenue are only to confuse and disturb the long river of time. Unless you are the patriarch of the three sects, you will be a great monk who is proficient in the 14 realms. For example, the old masters of Guandao Temple can never try to find any clues by going upstream along a long river of time. It's just that the mists and mists are the incense in the world that only gods can control. Or to take a step back, the second-class authentic works like calligraphy and painting are gold-fine copper coins. Therefore, Qin Pingan quietly asked Changming for a few bags of gold and copper while on the Fengyuan ferry, and of course he would keep accounts. In Cui Dongshan's view, once Jing Zhongyue can evolve into heaven and earth, it is almost the truth. Coupled with the caged finches, you can control the flow of time in a small world. Outsiders are in it and the fate can be imagined. Xiao Mo suddenly said with guilt, "I knew that this was the case. I promised fellow Taoist Ling Chun." Cui Dongshan turned his head, smiled and asked, "How to say?" It turned out that it was the long life of the former master of the Taoist Ling Chun. She was on the Fengyuan ferry before, and she wanted to buy a few good swordsmanships that had been lost from Xiaomao for the newly acquired disciple Nailan Jade. The price was arbitrary. Xiao Mo Ding she could exchange bags of gold, fine and bronze coins. Xiao Mo felt that he had been honored by the name of the last sect, so I was so embarrassed to collect money to teach Nailan Yes swordsmanship. It was a trivial matter. No matter how to refuse it, Xiao Mo had to make a ruthless word. Money will not be given to Jianpu. As a result, he really didn't need swordsmanship because of his long life. Anyway, she spent money on swordsmanship. She was casting a net. Cui Dongshan joked, Xiaoma, you are too honest and straightforward. How can this kind of thing be rigid? Ask Changming's sister for a bag and a half of gold essence and copper money. Swordsmanship is also given favor. There is also the best of both worlds." Xiao Mo was taught within humility and nodded, "I still haven't been able to really follow the customs." Cui Dongshan said, "I have a suggestion. At the foot of the mountain's Zhangxian Peak, isn't there a Xinjiai River and a Luobao Beach? When I turn back, I will give it to you as a place for cultivating. You can build a hut or something. Preach over there regularly." Xiao Mo was a little embarrassed. Xiao Mo can only say that the realm is acceptable, but this is a matter of great importance. It is really shallow, and it is estimated that it will only laugh generously. There is also the sun and the master of Tui Zhiyu. Xiao Mo not dare to be a teacher. In ancient times, regardless of the origin of Taoist, the word preacher was so heavy that it was unimaginable. Cultivation, preaching, gaining, preaching. One of the four is indispensable to be a true Taoist. Therefore, at the other side of Taoyuan, the son of his own family and the Yuan Ing monk named Lu Ing gave the 12 characters free of charge. Jingxi respects things and guards the world and ceases to cultivate to the cultivation of the Tao. Simply talking about Xiao Mo's heart. A cultivator needs to be mindful and considerate, respect everything in the world and at the same time be vigilant about the world, so don't easily say that you have built a great road. Still a long way to go. Cui Dongshan raised his hands, clenched his fists and finally held his palms facing each other, clapped his palms gently and smiled. Have you ever told you that you should not be arrogant, despised, belittle others, nor be arrogant and have no self in your heart? Underestimate yourself. Only if you don't go to extremes can you be considered a gentleman and a righteous person. Xiao nodded and said, "It's reasonable." In fact, Cui Dongshan didn't say much about it. The old master of this place is Tianwan, so her brother Zhou Zi must have walked through the cave ruins. Once the husband can walk in the long river of time he can find a chance to have a game with Zhou Zi Wenjian in the future. Although it may not be possible, it is not impossible. Thousands of mountains and rivers are unstoppable, no match for the pair of straw sandals on Mr. S' feet. Xiao said, "After I leave here, when the Fengyuan ferry returns to Xindu Mountain, I will go to Taoist Lingchun and ask for a few bags of gold, fine copper." Cui Dongshan nodded and said, "It is not easy to buy golden body fragments nowadays. There is no need to think about it on Aquarius Island. There will be nothing left by the Dei court. Even if someone sells it, it will be at a sky-high price. Tong on Yizhou's side plus the Fiaozhou, maybe there is still a chance. After the golden bodies of the gods of mountains and rivers are broken, they may not have all been raided by the wild army tents, but they can only be regarded as small leaks to pick up. After all these years he's recuperating and regenerating, the mountains have all eased, one by one ghosts and ghosts. Dressed in a green shirt, walked out of the thunder pool restriction. Cui Dongshan is in a complicated mood, deceiving the sky by self-deception. It's not a cover-up. Someone listened to the sky. The husband wanted to salute him in court. When the group came to the foot of the mountain, Cui Dongshan introduced, "This mountain is called Qisong Mountain. It is an unexpected joy to succeed. In fact, at the beginning, Chief Zhou and I tried our best to prevent Tianwan from leaving Aquarius, going to the sky with the famous cicada. This historically unknown cave site is not among the 36 small caves. It is now named Changchundongtian by Cui Dongshan. Tianwan, Zifeng, Xinjiang Mountain, Shilongfeng's genius brother in charge of spying." Qin Pingon and Cui Dongshan looked at each other. Cui Dongshan nodded vigorously. "This matter is feasible." Qin Pingon shook his head. "This kind of temporary intention is inappropriate and inappropriate." Cui Dongshan's eyes motioned. "Sir, you have to ask what Xiaomo means, otherwise it's a kind of alternative utterance unlike the sir." Qin Pingon still shook his head. Faced with the members of Luopa Mountain and Xindu Mountain, Xiaomo would set up barriers on his own. He would not check his heartstrings, let alone talk about his son and sect master Cui, so he only vaguely realized that this matter was related to him and said tentatively, "The sun is on Xiaomo's side. If there is anything else embarrassing, it is Xiaomo's dereliction of duty." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "It has nothing to do with your husband. I want to add a burden to Xiaomo. Can you manage the spy on the Luopa Mountain?" Unfortunately, Mr. refused. Xiaomo thought about it and said, "I can fight first and help me aside. If it turns out that Xiaomo is quite comfortable, of course I am willing to worry a little bit for the son." Qin Pingon joked, "Xiaomo, you are a sword repairman at the peak of the Ascension realm, and you go to deal with the spy house every day. Don't you feel that you are down?" Xiaomo shook his head and said, "It's just like reading books without spending money. Reading like this is the most interesting thing in the world." Cui Dongshan nodded vigorously. "Reasonable, just like wine that doesn't cost money to drink. It's the best wine in the world." Qin Pingon slapped Cui Dongshan's head. "I opened my own shop to make wine. What does it cost to drink?" Cui Dongshan went on to introduce, "This small cave sky, the boundary between mountains and rivers is not big but a radius of 100 miles. But the ore of heaven and earth is so abundant that it will not lose to Tonggizong's Wutong Xiadongshan. The total difference is at most 20 to 30%. This is the reason why I didn't pour the gods' money into it." Cui Dongshan shook his snow-white sleeves triumphantly. "Ha, who made me recognize a half-sister who has been separated for many years." Qin Pingon hesitated. "The vulgar man in the world looks at the sky. The blue sky is like a mirror, and the cultivator looks down on the mountains and rivers on the mountain. In fact, it is also a mirror, just relatively potholes. If he is not careful, the monk is like seeing the abyss on the mountain. See you all kinds of people again." Cui Dongshan nodded, knowing that her husband was reminding himself not to play with people's hearts. At the foot of the mountain, there is a stream with gurgling water. The stream is reddish, just like the cinnabar carefully refined by the fairy family, and the weight of the flowing water is far beyond ordinary. In his hometown of Lizhu Dongtian, the reason why Yuan Qiong built a blacksmith shop and a sword forging furnace on the riverside was because of the gloomy water of the Longshu River, suitable for sword making. Qin Pingon squatted by the stream with a handful of water in his hand, with beautiful jade luster. Cui Dongshan squatted aside and explained, "The reason why the stream has this vision is that the ancient pines on the mountain are thousands of years old, and the flowers of the immortal family are naturally withered and flourished. The characters have been strengthened. Naturally, it is an excellent talisman material. Looking back, we can use this to do business with you Lauer or Long Hushan. According to my estimation, if we take 3,000 kilograms of water a year, it will not the foundation of the avenue that affects the cave sky. But at least within Jiazi, Cui Dongshan didn't plan to make money from this cave, it would be of great use. In Qisong Mountain, the exotic flowers and weeds including chisum and poria have been marked and recorded by Cui Dongshan one by one." On the way to the mountain, Qin Pingon asked casually, "Do you have an account book?" Cui Dongshan said, "I do have them here, but I don't have them on the cultivator side yet. These strange flowers and weeds are numerous in the mountains. 100 years of age is a small hurdle. There are 216 trees. 100 years is a hurdle. Those who are over 300 years old have 70, and 1,000 years is a big hurdle. Similar to the life and death of a monk, there are 16 people who have survived this tribulation. In addition, the unique red pine in the mountain totals 3. 160 trees are more age-old than flowers and plants. There are 195 trees that survive the age of a 1,000-year-old tree, and there are 19 trees over 3,000 years old. Overall, the number is extremely impressive." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "A veritable Jinshan and Yinshan. In addition, on the top of the mountain, there is also a Zhangke immortal mansion with a vast sea of clouds." Qin Pingon came to a dead old pine that collapsed on the ground. The annual rings were extremely fine. After a glance, it was about 4,000 years old. Qin Pingon broke off a large piece of golden pine resin and started very heavy. Whether it is used for medicine or refining ink to make incense, Qin Pingon looked around. "This mountain is really full of gods and money. As long as you climb the mountain, you can pick it up." For no reason, I remembered the victory of my visit in Beiju Luzhou. Obviously, it was going to be much harder. So the next sect of Luopa Mountain, the Xindu Mountain built by Cui Dongshan, is not short of money, and lack of people is only temporary. No wonder Cui Dongshan, the sect master of the lower sect, can be so hard-hearted, and of course he spared no effort to dig up the walls of the upper sect. Qin Pingon didn't put the pine resin in his sleeve, but casually placed it on the decayed pine branch. Xiaomo found sect master Cui on the side as if eagerly looking forward to it. His eyes were full of expectation. When he saw his son put the resin back on, he looked a little disappointed. Qin Pingon clapped his hands, continued climbing and asked casually, "The cicada has disappeared for a long time, but it has not been removed. It is still one of the 36 small caves. Is there any talk here?" Cui Dongshan nodded and said, "The cicada sheds the cave sky. It is the most important site in the ancient Shu realm. It is not one of them because it is rumored that there have been several ancient sword immortals, where the cicadas escaped and soared. The cicadas slew. The ruins of later generations like Dadu and the River Dragon Palace are incomparable. Because every sword immortal remains and the rhyme remains, it may carry one or even several kinds of ancient swordsmanship." Qin Pingon asked curiously, "How did the cicadas disappear from Aquarius Island back then?" Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "This was the place where the master Jing Juzhong was proving the way. This guy has a high swordsmanship and a strong temper. He belonged to a foreigner who traveled across the continents to Aquarius Island. But this greatest opportunity was still won by him. It was in this small cave sky that made him ascend to the ascendant realm. Later, somehow this guy provoked the anger of the public and was surrounded by dozens of local and Biezo sword immortals. The two sides made a big fight. The land was broken and the casualties were heavy. There were 8 upper 5-level sword repairs and 6 Yuanying sword repairs. A total of 14 people, none of them ran away and they were all killed by that guy. Because it was a sword repair battle, the two sides just before handing over their swords. The state of life and death was established, and the battlefield was within the cicada's cave, so the innocent under the mountain was never harmed, and the Chinese temple of Confucius didn't care much. Xiao Imo praised him. No wonder he was able to become the later dragon slayer. Even if you don't talk about the level of swordsmanship, just talk about your temper and you have a good appetite. Qin Pingon said. The kendo chi fortune of Aquarius Island began to weaken from that time? Cui Dongshan nodded and said, among the sword immortals who died in battle, most of them were local sword repairmen in Aquarius, like a wealthy family, as if their home was ransacked overnight, and the situation naturally took a turn for the worse. It was still devastated, and later Tianwan and Bai Chong secretly joined forces to make trouble from it, so it was not until the rise of you that you had recovered a bit of vitality. The sequelae of Wenjian is extremely serious. For Aquarius Island, it is not just that the sword celestial beings have fallen into the cicada's cave, and many kendo celestial families have been affected. This cut off the incense of teacher inheritance, and all the swordsmanship that the sword cultivation bears. Fortune are all banned within the cicada's cavern sky, and there is something more troublesome, just like the entire Aquarius continent of swordsmanship, which is equivalent to being completely suppressed by a foreigner's sword repairman. Cui Dongshan finally said with a hippie smile, after all, it is Xing Zhezhong's preacher, so he is still a little bit too weak. Qin Pingon asked, why hasn't there been an enchanting and refining mountain spirit in the Akamatsu mountain so far? Cui Dongshan sighed. The old master here must be an ancient immortal with vast magical powers. He is probably a veritable secluded mountain man. He has a pure heart and lacks desires. The mountain's law, even if it is a few thousand years later, the plants and flowers in the mountains will still not be able to bloom. Even if he left here, he still did not untie the prohibition on mountains and waters. Qin Pingon couldn't help sighing, strange people and strange things. According to Tianwan's statement at the time, the cicada was not on her. She didn't lie, but to be precise, she didn't know where it was. It used a higher-level ban on mountain closure than that of the Queen Mother Nanzhan, and it must have been the handwriting of Tianwan's senior brother Zhou Xian. At the beginning, Cui Dongshan searched the mountains for inspections, only looking for the mountain gate in Tianwan's soul. Almost let Cui Dongshan talk, capsized the ship in the gutter. Now Tianwan only has a key to open the mountain. She speculated that she was taken to the sky of Lizhu Cave by her senior. But no matter how Cui Dongshan fortunes and deduces afterwards, he could not find a clue. Approaching the top of the mountain, Cui Dongshan suggested in a low voice, "Sir, you can concentrate on cultivating here before you go to the Qingming world. In this mountain, the gentleman can study swordsmanship with peace of mind, practice avenues, and cast all his lifelong learning and miscellaneous arts into a furnace, and finally he will rise. At the same time, this means that the husband can stay in the next clan for a long time. As for the Shangzong's Luopa Mountain, Mr. is used to being a shopkeeper anyway, and there are old cooks who are in charge of affairs. You also have a wealthy chief show, Mr. Xiao Mo, a sword repairman in the Ascension Realm, who is to be honored by name. The Ascension Realm's Wawawation demon is now a handyman. Are you embarrassed to him from me?" Qin Pingon declined the matter and instead suggested, "I'll leave it alone. It's better to let the three children Chai Wu, Bai Xian and King Sunchun come here to practice." Today Chai Wu, who was given by Xiao Mo as a gift, has successfully made it a life item, and she can barely be regarded as a swordsman. Qin Pingon was a bit worried before. On the way to the south, Feijian sent a letter to Xiandu Mountain on the side of Yayandu and Lingbai Mountain. In addition to sending Cui Dongshan a personally witnessed and hand-drawn picture along the way in the picture of the situation in the mountains and rivers, the letter also specifically asked about Chai Wu's sword-making matters, and I got a reply from there that the little girl's sword-making thing went smoothly. In general mountain sects, even in large sects, how to deal with the handful of cultivating qualifications worthy of the word stunning is always a big problem. Either it is easy to develop a habit of arrogance, or it is too old-fashioned to behave and only know how to practice, which is not at all familiar with the world. For example, Ma Linshur of Bailong Cave, as a direct disciple of Su Qingzhu, the master of the cave, has a high generation and good talents, and is also a fairy descendant of the Taoist couple on the mountain, who is loved by thousands of people. Up to now, Luopa Mountain can be said to be extraordinary in this matter. It is very different from the general world conditions on the mountain, and it is simply unique. With this style, Qin Pingon could not do it alone. At most he followed Wan Qiong and Huolong in the same way, and almost copied some unwritten rules of Longquan Jianzong and Patafeng. Among the third-generation children of Luopa Mountain Chai Wu, King Sun Chun Bai Xian. These 3 children are undoubtedly the best cultivators. Qin Pin Gon and Luopa Shan naturally would not deliberately pursue the so-called perfect balance. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "Massive little girls and dead fish-eye girls, the qualifications are so good I will definitely take it with me and preach for them carefully, but now they have a clear teacher biography I can only do some icing on the cake. It's a matter of fact, at most it is to pass down a few side door methods for them, and then teach some swordsmanship. For example, Chai Wu, I strive to neither pull out the seedlings to encourage her, nor waste her cultivation aptitude and see if I can help her ascend to the sky directly from the Lujin realm to the Yupu realm. From the current point of view I have some certainty. Yes, of course luck still needs some. In short, I can look forward to it a bit." Qin Pin Gon had to take out a jug of wine and was shocked by the drink. It's just this kind of shocking wine, Qin Pin Gon doesn't mind drinking a few more times. Wuxia Zhou. There is also the talented female cultivator in Qingming world, who is among the 10 young candidates. As well as a certain reincarnation of Li Lu, he directly entered the upper 5 realms from the Lujin realm. Even if there are some omissions, there are still a few well-deserved ones. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is a once-in-millennium encounter in a world. Cui Dongshan said sternly, "The 3 of Chai and Wu, whether they come here to practice or not, there is actually not much difference. Even if they do, they are not in a rush. So I still stick to the previous statement and hope that my husband can practice alone here." Qin Pin Gon smiled and said, "So that I can retreat here and take up this one? A small cave with a closed mountain can just support a cultivator to enter the Ascension realm here." Xiaomo was stunned. No wonder Sect Master Cui waited eagerly for the sun to put away the inconspicuous piece of resin. Cui Dongshan was very angry and did not deny the matter. Qin Pin Gon thought for a while and said, "When I travel the Middle-earth Divine Continent with Lu Jinglong, and then return here, I will give you an exact answer. If you really want to retreat here by then, you have to promise me one condition." Cui Dongshan understood and nodded. The student union will first step down as the next suzerain, and then follow the husband to travel through the Qingming world. Qin Pin Gon smiled and said, "The former doesn't matter, you discuss with Chao Qingqing, but the latter must be counted and no appointment is allowed to be missed." When he reached the top of the mountain, Cui Dongshan snapped his fingers and the cloud disappeared. His vision suddenly opened up. The vermilion gate slowly opened, and the shadow wall inside the gate was actually a huge stone monument. After crossing the threshold, Qin Pin Gon raised his head. Looking at the ancient words, they roughly explain the origin of the mountain, but the contents of the words are obscure and unclear. In short, the words can be recognized and the meanings are mostly do not understand. Daoshan Jiangfu Xianxia 10,000 miles Suochanwan. The road is struggling to cross, the front is first, the jade and the stone are burned. The spirit is rotten with the body and hate the yellow spring. Selling feng dye to cast a golden body, is it a weak world and thin world? After bypassing the steel, there is an empty hall with 12 statues of golden statues, but their faces are all blurred. Xiaomo said, "It's the 12 high-level gods who used to be high in the sky." Qin Pin Gon felt inwardly, hesitated and took out the narrow knife to execute, leaned the knife in both hands and the narrow knife hit the ground. In an instant the mist of one of the idols cleared, revealing his true face and slowly opened his eyes. As if looking at each other with Qin Pin Gon. The narrow sword held by Qin Ping's palm came from a sword-bearer, one of the 5 highest in the past, and was named the Executor by later generations. Cui Dongshan suddenly said, "Xiaomo, let's withdraw." Xiaomo nodded and followed the white-clothed boy back the same way. When they stood outside the door again, the door suddenly closed. Except for this executioner, sleeping near the Great Wall of Jianqi. There is also the high-ranking deity Single-Eyed Man, who has been dormant in the colorful world for thousands of years and was killed by Ning Yao with a sword. The high-ranking who appeared in Tongyi's Hao from the outside world once walked across the earth, mountains and rivers to the old dragon city of Aquarius Island, but was blocked by 2 senior brothers of Qin Pin Gon from landing. His name was the Echoes. The ancestor of the man Earth Immortal, the old man Yang in the backyard of the drugstore as the young boy Tianjun. The ancestor of the female Earth Immortal, was also a human monk, and she was the co-master of the sky and the moon in the ancient heaven. The two sides are in charge of an ascending platform that leads the earth to climb to become a god. And these two treat the earth as their hometown, always repaying kindness. They and the earliest master of the Taoist hairpin in Xianxia city, as well as the old master who was the master of Bixiadong Cave in Luobao Beach in the early years, are considered to be cultivators of the same generation. Xiaomo was a little bit later in cultivation and younger than these. Wang Mei is the master of dreams, so that all spiritual beings other than gods, especially monks who start climbing, can easily fall into upside-down dreams and then give birth to demons. The wordless possesses a magical power of stopping speech, so it is also known as the one with the voice of the heart. According to legend, this is the source of the voices and words of the cultivators, and the purely converging sounds of the martial artist. Re-engravers created countless copies of the sun, moon, mountains and rivers, so they are also known as imaginers or casters. The Lord of Leibu Divisions. The layout person, under the command of Vulcan, is responsible for the placement of all the corpses of the gods. The Kyasa, under the command of the god of water, is in charge of the orderly flow of the long river of time. Finally, there is a high-ranking god, whether it is the Middle-earth Confucian Temple, the Western Buddhist Kingdom, the Baiyujing under the Qingming world, or the Summer Palace of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. There is no record in later generations and no title is used, just like a kind of remote respect. The Ancient Five is the highest. The Heavenly Court is the Master, the Sword-bearer, the Armored Person, the of Fire and the of Water. After that is the 12th high. In addition to the Only and Signed, there are the Executioner, the One-eyed, the Slumber, the Voice of the Heart, the Engraver, the Echoer, the Lord of the Leibu Divisions, the Arranger, the Messenger, and the ancestors of the last two men and women. In addition, Ant Feng, one of the ancient wind gods. Yusher, that hometown kiln worker. As for the old coachman in Dalijing City, his deity is slightly lower, which is similar to the difference between Liubu Shirlang and Longguan in the former. But although the latter has a slightly lower official status, he has a prominent priesthood and great authority, because the old coachman is the chief official of one of the divisions of the Thunder Department of the Old Heavenly Court. 2 times Qin Pingon twisted 3 sticks of incense from his sleeves and worshipped the 2 gods. One of them has great merit in beings who have spirits in heaven and earth. The other one, Yu Qin Pinyin, has a great kindness himself. The old saying goes that suffering is a blessing. It is to teach people to be good. To endure hardship is to endure hardship, but the more you eat, the harder you get. There are some unspeakable sufferings. When a person has finally survived, he can just accept it silently. Don't say anything lightly to others who are suffering. It is a monster. Go out of the main hall, go around the stele and open the gate. The eyes are clear, the field of vision is broad, and the sky is clear and clear. This year in Tonggishao during the light snow season, there have been a few heavy snowfalls with goose feathers, and the weather is extremely cold. Every house in the fairy mansion on the mountain is covered with snow. The thick snow is everywhere in the world, and the sound of broken jade is one after another. I didn't expect to really wait until the heavy snow season, but it was just a perfunctory sleet. The 2 peaks of Xindu Mountain, Qingping and Xianxia, stand side by side. As the ancestral mountain and the main peak, Qingping Peak, the summit of Fuyoping, is also the site of the Xiazongzu Shirtang. As for the second peak, the Xianfeng, there is a Tsingyi River at the foot of the mountain and there is a Luobao Beach on the bank. It has no relationship with the old master's Bixiao Cave and Luobao Beach. Cui Dongshan just used it to win a favor, hope for the future monks of the next sect. Whether they enter the mountain to visit the immortals or go down the mountain to experience, the treasures are like rain and one after another is in peace. The flower-sweeping platform on the top of this peak has already been photographed by Sui Wright, and she has opened up a place for cultivating Taoism. In addition, Xindu Mountain has a slightly lower branch mountain, which is named Mixifeng by Cui Dongshan. The cliffs are very exposed and all are jade white. There will be 50 or 60 mansions built on the mountain. There is only one house at present, barely looking like a fairy house. Cui Dongshan specially prepared for his husband. No one else has this treatment. Chao Sunny and Pei Qian belonged to Zhongguang and lived in the east and west wing separately. In the early morning of this day, Qin Pingon retired from the small world of the human body with a grain of mind. After getting out of bed, he was about to put on his cloth shoes, looked up at the light rain outside the window and changed his boots. After walking out of the house, he found Pei Qian sitting under the eaves and watching the rain. After seeing the master, Pei Qian said that Chao Sunny and Mr. Xiaomo had both gone to help the little brother. As for Pei Qian herself, of course she has to stay here to take care of Master's diet and daily life. She first asked Master if she would like to have breakfast. After Qin Pingon nodded, Pei Qian asked Master to wait and go to the stove to be busy for a while. The food was served soon. Qin Pingon sat at the table with his arms folded, squinting and smiling. A bowl of warm millet porridge, 2 plates of pickles and a cage of crab noodle soup on the table. Qin Pingon picked up his chopsticks, drank porridge and ate vegetables, and then put a crab noodle soup bag, smiled and nodded. Good craftsmanship, nourish the stomach and nourish people. From now on. I wanted to say that in the future if Pei Qian married someone, whoever marries and enters the door will be blessed. But when he thought of this kind of thing, Qin Ping's awkward mentality of being a master and father again began to cause trouble and stopped talking. After finally raising my daughter, why is the water thrown out by the married daughter? How could there be such a in the world? But Pei Qian will really meet her favorite person in the future, so just marry someone. It's just that kid, don't want to see a good face on your side, don't be covered in a sack, just burn it. Pei Qian found that Master's expression changed, which was extremely rare, and couldn't help asking, Master, is there something on your mind? Qin Pingon smiled and said, it's okay. But after holding back for a long time, Qin Pingon was cautious and deliberately asked in an understatement, seemingly casually, in those years Master was not around, you traveled by yourself and traveled such a long way. Meet a better peer or a young handsome man on the mountain. Pei Qian thought for a while, nodded and said, seeing some I am quite capable. Qin Pingon smiled, is there someone who impressed me the most? What's his name? After the master traveled to the Middle-earth continent, he had to meet him for a while. Pei Qian looked weird and finally began to notice something was wrong. Master, what about it? Qin Pingon said solemnly, it's just small talk. Pei Qian complained, Master, don't think about it, I don't have those children who are long and afflicted in the book. Just practicing martial arts and boxing is enough. Qin Pingon smiled and said, I saw 2 pairs of master and apprentice on a weird mountain top. Pei Qian was at a loss. Qin Pingon ridiculed, there is a little black charcoal among them who is dazed and still in a daze when he sees the master. He goes down with a chestnut, holding his head and screaming. Pei Qian grinned. In Tongyi's Hao, Qin Pingon ranked among the 10 martial artists with the strongest status today, but found that the martial arts gifts were less than expected, but soon Qin Pingon knew the answer. It turned out that martial arts was invisible. It was 2, and then it was as if someone was forcibly dragged to an unfamiliar world, where there were 11 people standing on the weird mountain top. In a big world, the martial arts are thick and watery, and 11 pure martial arts are surrounded by a circle, so there is no difference in rank and they are all the strongest martial arts in a certain realm for 10,000 years. No one has been before. Among them are 2 pairs of mentor and apprentice. Zhongtu Duduan Dynasty Pei Cup Chao Ci. Aquarius Chao Luopa Mountain Qin Pingon Pei Qian. And Chao Ci, this guy even occupies 4 positions on the top of the mountain alone. Qin Pingon was worried that practicing boxing would be too hard. When she was a child, Pei Qian, who was most afraid of pain, would she give up halfway through. Now I am worried that Pei Qian's hard training in boxing will feel unworthy, because the practice of martial arts belongs to the fact that you will retreat if you don't advance against the current. With a pure qi like an iron horse, patrolling the mountains and rivers, unlike a monk just refining with the destiny, opening up residences is like building a city, dividing troops to occupy the dangerous pass, knowing the mountains and rivers of their own, and then step by step to learn the aura of the world, or dig a mountain or fill a lake and continue to add to the family. Qin Pingon finished eating early, put down his chopsticks and asked nonchalantly, Pei Qian, master asked you what happened to the martial arts summit? Pushing the bamboo drawer on the table towards Pei Qian, he smiled and said, don't answer in a hurry, you won't be too late after eating. Pei Qian clipped the last crab noodle soup bag and said vaguely, except for master, there is no one in front of him. Not enough. Qin Pingon shook his head and smiled, answer again. Pei Qian looked surprised, huh? She quickly swallowed the soup bag and wiped her mouth. Isn't that enough? Seeing that the master was still waiting for the answer, Pei Qian had to bite the bullet and whispered, only 1 level lower than the master? Qin Pingon glared. Pei Qian scratched his face. Then dare to be at the same level as master? Qin Pingon laughed angrily, put his fingers together and tapped on the table like chestnut. Be serious. Pei Qian only feels anxious, so master still wants to be serious about himself. Qin Pingon thought about changing his terms. He suddenly looked solemn and asked in his heart, Pei Qian, you got the word strongest several times, so you haven't met any strange people or strange things? The key is that Pei Qian is also on the top of the mountain. She has a place. Pei Qian began to check his memory, then remembered something and nodded and said, Master, it's barely possible. When I was a child I seemed to have a dream and then I saw a weird man who couldn't remember who it was. He took me with me. Not climbing. Instead I went down the mountain and the other party asked me what I did to learn boxing. When I was young and ignorant I honestly answered what I thought at the time. Obviously it is starting to pave the way. At that time I was young and ignorant. I liked nonsense. Master, don't take it seriously. You can't settle accounts after autumn. Qin Ping waited quietly. Pei Qian became more guilty but didn't dare to hide anything. Yuishi and Master talked about the process in detail. It turned out that Pei Qian felt that he was dreaming anyway, so he was afraid of a hammer and absent-mindedly said to learn a hammer boxing. As the master's pioneering disciple he just learned something well from the master. Otherwise he would be so miserable when practicing boxing. Why bother? On his way down the mountain Xiao Heitan was bouncing and screaming like the big white goose, while handing a fist to the very tall guy next to him, asking him if he was afraid. When Qin Pingon heard this he couldn't help but stretched out his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. Not surprisingly, it is what Xiao Heitan can say and do. Then Pei Qian's next sentence made Qin Ping an angry laugh and couldn't help but take a deep breath. Don't be afraid, are you? Then you wait, when my master comes, you have to kneel down and bang your head, believe it or not, do you believe it? Qin Pingon kept smiling and hooked his palms. Come here. Fortunately, master has accepted you as a pioneering disciple. Come on, I haven't eaten enough, there are enough chestnut tubes. Pei Qian smiled awkwardly and said, Master, I cleaned up the dishes and ran away. In rainy and snowy weather, Qin Pingon went for a walk alone under an umbrella, along a Panyu mountain road, to the simple hut where Cui Dongshan was located, to discuss the selection of candidates for the ceremony. It's a pity that there are no cliff carvings for the time being. In fact, if the next clan is really willing to let Julien catch a knife, it can be fake. It is estimated that in a few days, countless famous cliff carvings will appear. Of course Cui Dongshan can do it himself. Wearing a green shirt, gently rotating the umbrella handle in the misty drizzle. Now that a specific date has been set, the next sect's founding celebration will be the day of the beginning of spring next year. Then the Shangzong's Luopa Mountain and a newly built sword house in Xindu Mountain have started to get busy, and Fei Jin sends a letter to invite all guests to observe the guests. It's just that, compared to the celebration that Luopa Mountain founded the sect, fewer people watched the ceremony, and even on the side of Luopa Mountain not everyone would come. For example, Qin Pingon only invited Lu Jinglong Zhong Kue, and Huang Ting, who is equal to one person and two sections. In today's Wuxia world, a Jindan monk can start a sect and Zhongtu Confucian Temple will not care anymore. In addition, there are Lu Yong of the Green Tiger Palace, Yi Yunyun of Pushun Thatched Cottage, Lu Ro, the of water buried in the Bio Palace of the Daquan Dynasty, and a pair of landscape gods, Xing Su, the of Jinhuang Mansion, and Lu Yorong, the of Songzhen Lake. Whether it is the number of people present or the scale of the celebration, it may not be as good as a golden pill opening ceremony. At the door of the hut, Qin Pingon closed the oil paper umbrella, leaned against the wall outside the door and stepped into it. There was a large bookcase filled with hand-painted draft drawings of Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan took a step back and saluted his husband through the bookcase. Qin Pingon waved his hand and motioned him to keep busy with himself. Sitting on the bench, he picked up a manuscript made of earth and wood that was still glowing with ink. The 4 treasures of the study on the table are all extremely shabby. I used my own green bamboo in the mountains as a pen holder, and randomly placed a bundle of Daquan Dynasty chicken pens. The rest of the cooked rice paper and pine smoke ink were purchased from the market. Qin Pingon put down the drawing and raised his head and asked, although he lent Lin Shou 100 grains of rain money, there are still a lot of surpluses of the gods' money in the Luopashen treasury. How can they get 500 or 600 grains of rain money? It's really unnecessary. Since all the products of that Changchundongtian can't be turned into immortal money for the time being, we have to forget it. On the side of Luopa Mountain, the skeletal beach of Luzhou in Beiju, the Pai Ma Zong and Chunlapu commerce routes, almost included the treasures of heaven and material in the southeast coastal area of the continent. Later, Yunshang City and Dian Dynasty were added. Pingjian Lake has allowed Luopa Mountain to make a lot of money these years. Cui Dongshan shook his head and smiled. Sir, it really doesn't cost much. Qin Pingon nodded and talked about the list of guests he invited. Cui Dongshan was a little helpless. No matter what the next sect is, he is still my husband, and even the upper sect lord, this little matter what to discuss. Qin Pingon found that there was Fang's private seal on the table. In the cold season, the pond dries up, the lotus leaves are exhausted, the dead branches slanting, and there is no more rain cover, so the fish are scattered. Qin Pingon gently put the seal back to its original position, knowing that Cui Dongshan was talking about the change in Lizhu Cave. The 8-character Zhuan base paragraph, the insects and birds are like a heavenly script, the scriptures of the sky and the meaning of the earth, explaining the words. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, I was a guest at Saiji Mountain at the top of the Nanyue Chujun Mountain. I am the innocent person in Zhuhai Dongtian. I was idle, I had some grievances and I had feelings. It's down. If you like it, take it, you can barely use it as a collection of books. Qin Pingon shook his head and declined the matter and asked, Do you need help with the relocation of the remaining 2 mountains? Cui Dongshan said, No, it's not as light as the Xindu Mountain, the 2 auxiliary hills, it's much lighter, 2 trips back and forth, walk faster, it will last for a month and a half. Qin Pingon roughly talked about the process of the trip to Pushan. Cui Dongshan said, In fact, to be careful, Huang Yiyun should hand over this immortal picture to the Zhongtu Confucian Temple. Otherwise it may be a big hidden danger if it stays in Pushan. For example. Forget it, there is nothing like it. Cui Dongshan is afraid of his crow's mouth. I really want to say it. For Pushan, it is a shocking change that does not lose the catastrophe of Taiping Mountain such as a fairy picture because it is a layered array. Once at a certain moment by the master behind the scenes, using cunning means to open the prohibition remotely, move his hands and feet on the formation hub, and instantly explode, at least equivalent to the self-destructing Jindan, nascent soul and skin pouch soul of a fairyland monk. It's so big and powerful, it's about the equivalent of a sword repair in the Ascension realm. It is estimated that there will be half of Pushan left, and it is all lucky. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Yiyun knows the importance of it and is very easy to discuss, so the original immortal picture has actually been secretly put in the sleeve by Xiao Mo. It can be regarded as helping Pushan to keep it for a few days. As for Pushan's secret library inside, there was only a fake. Yiyun didn't even say Shuai, and then it's up to see if he can catch an extra big fish. Cui Dongshan nodded and said, Shuai may only be the first layer of blindfold. On Pushan's side, if one is not paying attention, he will hide behind him. With a careful acting style, since Pushan's long-term plan has failed, he will never show mercy. Qin Pingon said, For example, Yi Yunyun's brother, after the war ended, he has been running around outside the mountain for these years and has not been in Yunkatang. Just like this time Qin Pingon visited Pushan Yunkatang, he could not see each other. Not afraid to speculate on others with the greatest malice, and willing to give the greatest kindness to others, the two are just seeming contradictions. In fact, the 2 sides are not in conflict. After hearing a trip on the Jilin River, Cui Dongshan's eyes lit up and he curiously said, It turned out to be an engagement shop? Obviously, Cui Dongshan had heard of the engagement shop, but he probably never saw it personally. He rubbed his hands and said, Sir, the old women and girls who opened the tea shed by the Jilin River, are you willing to serve as our worship to Xindu Mountain? Not only are they enshrined, but it's okay to be 2 guest officials, either by name or by name you can follow them. Qin Pingon angrily smiled and said, Now you start to call Mr. Wei? The old real person Liang Shuang, now a great celestial master of Long Hushan, let him uncover the talisman without any problems. After the old woman regained her freedom and the girl who likes to mess with the mandarin ducks, where did the master and the apprentice go from now on? Qin Pingon didn't ask at that time. Qin Pingon said, If you really want to try to attract them, you can send a letter to Pushan from Feijian, and ask Yi Yunyun or Shuai to help. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, Just wait for Mr. S. words. Qin Pingon smiled. Cui Dongshan couldn't help laughing. The 9 sword fairy embryos brought back by Qin Pingon from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting have followed Yue to another place, and there are 7 children left, of which Trung Chaolu has now followed Sui right to practice swords at the Huatai. Yu Shihui is considered Zhanglu Tsuiwei as his master by pinching his nose. He Gus master is Mi Dajiangxian who will serve as the chief priest of the next sect. If you add the Nalan Jade on the Fengyuan Ferry he will be abducted by the next clan. 4 came. If you add King Sun Chun there are 5. Only Bai Xian and Yao Xiaoyan remained, staying in Luopa Mountain and Baijiantai. Bai Xian's fear of the big white goose was only a small part of the reason. Yao Xiaoyan fell in love with the new master who was as tall as both parties. It's just that since Qingping Jianzong is a swordsmanship sect so when student Cui Dongshan dug the foot of the wall like this, Qin Pingon also recognized it. But in the end Cui Dongshan, the lower sect master, is a bit omnipotent, even he has to dig the foot of the wall and come to the lower sect. After all, once you choose to retreat in Changchun-Dongtian, no matter if you are from Yupu in the future the bottleneck becomes immortal or higher, is not something that can be solved in a few months, it takes several years or even longer. Qin Pingon said, I'm hesitant to invite Li Fuyu from Zhenjingzong. After all, this Yuan Yingyan Vishio is still a guest of Luopa Mountain. As for the suzerain Lu Laoqing of Zhenjingzong and the chief worshipper Lu Jimao, forget it. Except for the 3-color jade bracelet of Fu, Lu and Shou in one glance, Qin Pingon cheeky and asked for a robe with Xiao Mo, intending to send the 2 together to Zhou Xian of the True Realm sect of Aquarius. Cui Dongshan shook his head and said, it doesn't make much sense. The next sect should save the next robe. Qin Pingon asked, what do you mean? Cui Dongshan held back a smile and said, Sir Xiao Mo has discussed with me. Before the next sect holds the celebration he will give me some robes and strive to make the members of the Patriarch Hall of the next sect, the direct disciple and worship the Kuqing. Anyway there are not many. Then there is one hand and everyone who sees it has a share. As for the guests who come to Qingping Peak to observe the ceremony, they are a little bit overwhelmed. The next school is not good at favoring one another and it hurts feelings. Then no one will give it away. Qin Pingon said helplessly, this little stranger. I just said that I would accompany myself as a guest at Piyun Mountain for the first time. When Xiaomo gave it away he would directly give out 2 pieces of semi-fairy ranked treasures, and they were extremely popular because the pair looked at the pockets and cute little weapons big usefulness especially in the hands of a Wuyue mountain monarch, who can make the best use of everything. A sapphire axe can be used to open the mountains, and Huang Yue is used to suppress water transport. Now Wei Shanjun guesses that he can laugh out loud in his dreams. Weibo can't wait for Xiao Mo to visit Beiyue again every day by breaking his fingers? Cui Dongshan called out, Sir. Qin Pingon was a little puzzled. Huh. Cui Dongshan smiled brightly, although Mr. does not carry the sword now. Qin Pingon categorically said, Stop it. Cui Dongshan still opened the mouth and said, The qi swallows the mountains and rivers and the sword is Qiuqiu. Qin Pingon stood up and muttered, The evil spirit of Luopa Mountain is your starting point. Cui Dongshan looked aggrieved. Sir, after thinking about it, I have finally determined who is the number 1 contributor to our downfall. Qin Pingon was curious. Who is it? Cui Dongshan lowered his voice and said, It's a little treasure bottle. Qin Pingon was stunned, sat back to the original position, rubbed his chin, but quickly scolded Cui Dongshan. You should not sue little treasure bottle here for the tricky things that you didn't shoot. Cui Dongshan rubbed his forehead and smiled bitterly. If it is said that the younger sister Guizhujio may be the only bitter hand of Pei Qian, and Pei Qian is the bitter hand of many people. So Cui Dongshan's side of course, is the little girl in the red cotton padded jacket back then. It's just that not many people know about it. Cui Dongshan said, Sir, do it first if you have anything. However, Qin Pingon just turned around and continued to sit, then looked at the drizzle outside the door and laughed softly. It's not busy. Xindu Mountain, the top of the side branch of the Xianfeng Mountain sweeping the flower platform. Sui Right and disciple Ching Chaolu taught swordsmanship and boxing, so she went to the Qingyi River at the foot of the mountain to enjoy the scenery. Wuxia returned to the gap between sword practice, walked here to relax halfway through the rain, holding the closed oiled paper umbrella, playing as a sword all the way. The masters of the 2 sword fairy embryos are both Yuanying realm sword repairers, but now one is an official and the other is an improper official. Yu Xianhui put the oil paper umbrella on the railing beside the cliff, with his toes touching the ground, and sitting on the railing, watching the little cook practice his fist and walk the pile, seeing that he was quite stance. When Qing Chaolu finished practicing and came to Yu Zaihui's side, the little cook hesitated for a long time, but was still embarrassed to speak. Yu slanted his arms around his chest, shook his legs and said, "If you have a fart, let it go." Qing Chaolu whispered, "Let's rest, although I don't like Cui Wei very much, but..." Before Qing Chaolu finished speaking, Yu Xia turned back a bit unwilling, grabbed the conversation and was out of anger. "Cui Wei is the next ruler anyway, this guy is small-minded, you should pay attention when you speak." "I don't like Cui Wei, why are you? Are you a little cook or a sword repairer in the lower 5 realms? Rest for a while." This is the nickname Bai Xian gave to Yu Xianhui and Qing Careless Little Cook, Nalan Yes Little Abacus, but it's better than Sun Chun's Dead Fish Eye. Insufficiency is more than the following, and Yu Xian returned to them one by one and tacitly agreed. Of course there is also the self-proclaimed little hermit of Bai Xian, but no one admits it. It seems that the last time I met the little hidden official, Chen Li, Bai Xian was still deflated at the time. Qing Chaolu habitually rubbed her fat cheeks and let out a cry. Among the 9 children who traveled far away, Fatty is the one with the best temper. However, last time in Yunku Fudi, Qing Chaolu asked a fist for the first time in her life, and she won simply and neatly. It seemed that the other party was still a monk in the Dragon Gate realm. Although it was the big white goose that secretly moved his hands and feet, it has already made the children look at him with admiration. They didn't say anything, but they all had a steelyard in their hearts. At that time even Cui Dongshan had a small surprise, but he was still a bad temper and he was unambiguous when he started. After all, he was born in a place like the Great Wall of Jianqi and he was more important than his surname. The high school students on Taixiang Street and Yuhu Street, it is okay if they are not sword repairers. If they are sword repairers, they can make soft swords on the battlefield. They can't earn real combat merits, which is most despised. Qing Chaolu cautiously said, "Have a rest anyway. I have seen it out. Master Hermit did not look down on your master at all." "No, I look down on it very much. As for why, I don't understand. Anyway, there is such a thing." When Yu Xia went back to school, Master Hermit put his hands in his sleeves and nodded sternly. The little cook finally said something decent. "If you look down on him, can that Cui Wei settle down in Luapa Mountain for worship? The ranking is not low. Now it is the rule of the next sect. If you are not very dear, can you drink at the same table with Lord Hermit and Big White Goose?" He could see it very clearly and remember clearly that Cui Wei ranked second in the number of toasts that the hermits and others took the initiative to toast. Qing Chaolu said, "I don't know where Yu Qingzhong and he bookcase are now." Yu Xia replied with no good air, "I care where the two have no conscience." Qing Chaolu whispered, "Is it considered that everyone has their own ambitions?" Yu Shihue sneered, non-committal. Yu Xia glanced back in the distance. The right Sui, who saw no one's smiling face, had already walked a long way. Then he lowered his voice and asked, "Little cook, tell me the truth, huh?" "What? Your master with our hidden officer, eh?" Qing Chaolu was confused. "What do you mean?" Yu Xian stretched his hand out of his sleeves, patted the little fat man on the shoulder, learned the movements of the hidden official, and then learned the tone of the hidden official. "Chaolu, you are a fool and a blessing. I heard that there is an unwritten rule on the table of the liquor store at the Great Wall of Jianqi, calling someone's name without awe, which means that they are not close. They are outsiders and they are by no means trusting." Qing Chaolu smiled. "Stupid people have silly blessings, these words love to hear very much." Yu Xianhui suddenly jumped off the railing. Qing Chaolu turned her head to see. It turned out that it was the hidden officer who came. Yu Xia reminded, "Don't say anything that shouldn't be said." Qing Chaolu nodded vigorously. "I know." Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "What shouldn't you say?" Yu Xia sighed back. "Little cook secretly likes Nalan Jade card." Qing Chaolu was stunned for an instant. Qin Pingon gave a cry, pretending to be surprised. "I thought Qing Chaolu liked Yao Xiaoyan." Picking up the oil paper umbrella in his hands and slapped his palms, Qin Pingon nodded and said, Yes, it's no wonder that he would spend money to buy books with Nalan Jade card. It turned out to be close to the book on purpose. Qing Chaolu, you kid, okay, little with this kind of savvy at a young age, I will not worry about finding a wife in the future." Qing Chaolu blushed. It was not the case at all. Nalan Yuzhao, a small wealth fan, does have a good habit. She would transcribe all the golden and good words that Mrs. Hermit said one by one. Qing Chaolu was worried that she would miss the rules, so she needed to borrow files from her frequently. Every time you read a page you have to spend money. In fact, there are not many words on a page and often there is only one sentence. Nalan Yubi even made up an account book for Qing Chaolu specifically to calculate interest. You slanted back to the side and laughed. After smiling back at the angle, you said in a low voice, "His Lord Hidden Officer, I can assure you that I will definitely enter the cave realm soon, not much slower than King Sun Chun and Bai Xian." Qing Chaolu had issued a military order when she saw Xier, so she had to say, "My lord, I want get the bottom." In fact, if you want to say it to your heart anyway, among the 9 peers, how can there be a bottom and I am not bad? Besides, Master Hermit has already said that stupid people can practice stupidly. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "The hardest learning in the world is hard work and the simplest learning in the world is the result." You diagonally nodded. Then Qin Pingon blinked and turned around to tease the little fat man. "Remember to tell Nalanyu to listen to this sentence when you look back. There will be no chance to chat with her, don't thank me." Yu Xianhui started to laugh again. Qing Chaolu sighed. If Nalanyu knew about it she would be beaten to death. Qin Pingon took out 4 books from his sleeve, 2 for each. 2 of the swordsmanship, and 1 shaking mountain boxing book, are of course hand-copied copies. The boxing book is for Qing Chaolu and there is also a booklet for Yu Xianlong and Qin Pingon does not have it. With heartfelt words he smiled and said, "Yu Xianhui, this booklet, remember to keep it. Don't let outsiders read it easily. The content of the book may not be useful, you should read it as a miscellaneous book." Yu Xianhui's natal flying sword happened to be called Pu Zi Ling. Because of the night ship at the Confucian Temple, Qin Pingon specifically turned through some books about this, and if he had some experience he chose the content and recorded it in a book. After taking the book with both hands solemnly, the 2 children thanked Master Hermit. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and touched the heads of the 2 children. After Yu Xianhui put the 2 books in his arms, he suddenly whispered, "His Master Hermit, I heard that you have met many confidants on the rivers and lakes." Qin Pingan's heart tightened, his face remained unchanged and he smiled and asked, "Who told you?" Yu Xia replied, "Bai Xian, who else can it be? He has a nose and eyes and Qing Chaolu can testify." The little fat man began to pretend to be a fool. Except for King Sun Chun, everyone is a little bit confused. Previously on the side of the vassal hill of Luopa Mountain worshipping the sword stand, Uncle Bai Xian was really careless about sword practice, but he practiced boxing harder than Qing Chaolu and often said a catchphrase, "My Uncle Bai Xian still needs sword practice? Did you come here to be a fairy with the hermit?" "Of course not. I came here to learn boxing. I didn't want to confuse it. I said that I was a sword cultivator and bullied them with their spears and clubs." But Bai Xian's practice is extremely exhausted and lazy, but his sword-making speed is extremely fast, so I like to walk around the house every day after holding his hands with his hands, to be a good teacher, and to guide others in practice. The problem is that Bai Xian's 3 words, often in one sentence, really useful. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Okay, I'll have a good chat with Bai Xian when I look back." In the end, the young and the young 3 Zhenxiu looked at the distant scenery by the railing together. The weather is fine after the rain and the weather is new. The earth and rivers are like things without a master. After the rain, the country looks like made of gold and iron. On the Fengyuan ferry, apart from the energetic second-in-charge Jiaxing, every day he only knows that Zhang Jiazhen, the accountant who is immersed in the accounts and the innocent and long life, but her direct disciple the small abacus Nalan Yubi, is really capable in the accountant. Help give Zhang Jiazhen a hand, keep the accounts and settle the accounts knowingly. Of course the most boring one must be Mi Daijian who escorted the Fengyuan ferry in name. After going back and forth, Miyu is very familiar with the little girl Chai Wu. She seems to love the fairy life in the clouds and fog. Instead of setting foot on Xiandu Mountain, she stayed on the ferry all the time. Just lie on the windowsill to look at the scenery or walk a few times around the bow and stern. The little girl drinks alone, she is very demeanor. Like her practice, no one taught it, it was born. With a squeak, nodded, twisted a grain of salted peanuts, a plate of cucumbers and a plate of sauced meat. The master is right, it's good to be a god, you spend money on meat instead of spending money. Therefore we must practice hard and we must not be driven off the boat by Lord Shanzhu, and strive to be a direct disciple. Chai Wu is a little worried. The master of the mountain, who was said by the master that the amount of alcohol is the same as that of him, seems to feel that he is stupid and not suitable for spiritual practice. It is estimated that the master of the mountain does have a lot of things at hand, and he is not happy anyway. I taught my knowledge myself and later I let Mr. Xiaomo go out. Qin Pingon asked me to help the little girl defend the way a bit recently. After all, among the Qi practitioners, Jianxiu and Fu Lu had notoriously high thresholds. The ferry went all the way south and took a trip to the southernmost mountain crossing. On the top of a hill in the mountain crossing, there is a guest Qing from Ia's Hao Lu who is stationed there, nominally helping to pick up some intercontinental ferry boats, but there is actually nothing to do. This Su Hao, known as Su Jun, was only 200 years old and was a great sword fairy. In his hometown of Jinjiazu, Su Hao used a sword to block Wanyan Liujing's defiance. Before that, Su Hao had not been famous until the turbulent times came and he was born. Wang Ji, who played chess with Su Hao on the top of the mountain, was enshrined by the ancestor of Yugui, and he was nicknamed as a superintendent. Wang Ji and Chongqiu are both scholars. When they met, they took the time to play a few chess games. As for Mi Yu and Su Hao, who watched the game, there was nothing to talk about between the two sides. They just looked at each other and there was nothing to follow. On the side of Yuguazong's by Chengdu and Fengyuan ferry, I learned about the fact that Shenzhufeng, which has been suspended for many years, has just had a new owner, and Yuguazong Patriarch Hall has no objections, and is dedicated to this sword repair. By making an exception, he was able to enter the Lord God Seal Peak in advance without having to join the Golden Corps. Because that kid is only 9 years old now, a sword repairman in the Longmen realm. I heard that I have 3 natal flying swords. It seems that apart from the proud son of heaven came into being, there is no reason to explain it. And Yuguazong is now a private ferry that can accommodate several transcontinental ferries at the same time. Excluding the Zhenjingzong of the next sect of Aquarius, there are as many as 3. In addition to Bai Chengdu, there are also Adversity Ferry and Yuanyuan Ferry. Shandu, the latter two are both built on the top of the Vassal Mountain. Afterwards, the ferry returned north and stayed in the air near the Rin River during the period. Zhongqiu and Miyu went to the stall by the river together. Tao Ran is quite polite on the teacher's side. He has met several times and has a good impression. The Golden Corps swordsman said that he had come to call people earlier, claiming to be also from Xindu Mountain, and one of the swordsmen in Qingshan was also Cui Xianxi's husband, whose name was Qin Pingon. This person drank a bowl of wine here and didn't make any trouble, but this person couldn't speak well, saying that he was the Qin Jianxian from Aquarius Island. Since the words are so humorous, why not go to the storytelling under the overpass to make a lot of money? Miyu looked compassionate and stretched out his hand, wanting to pat the Golden Corps sword immortal's shoulder to show comfort. Tao Ran heard these words by Pei Qianhe. Tao Ran tilted his shoulder, avoiding the claw. He was not familiar with this guy who claimed to be Yumi, and he was dressed in white on both occasions. Think of yourself as Qi Tingji of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, or at the same table with Qi Lao Jianxian. Have you ever had a drink? Besides, Tao Ran looked at this man's appearance and demeanor. It was like Jiang Shangzhen's romantic fetus, which was very eye-catching. Miyu put his hand away, picked up a bowl of wine on the table, took a sip and drank Mi Daijiangxian, frowning, right? Today Tao Ran really doesn't know anything about it. In the past, the Great Wall of Jianqi, almost every time it was Qi Tingji's turn to inspect the city, he would take the initiative to find Miyu for a drink among the clouds. Although the ages of the two sides are very different, and the realm of swordsmanship is also very different, they are all beautiful men recognized by the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Zhongqiu smiled and didn't explain anything but told Tao Ran some precautions. Tao Ran didn't have any impatience and noted them one by one. After the Fengyuan ferry docked at his own Xindu mountain, Miyu could not see the hidden officer. Chao Qingqing said that her husband was practicing, but Miyu got a message that the hidden officer asked him to return to Nujiadu Beipingzu this time. Be sure to bring Bai Xian. Miyu was a little gloating. After passing by Qingjingshan Qinghu Palace, the old Lu Yong personally handed a porcelain vase to Zhongqiu, and asked Master Zhong to transfer it to Lord Chen Shan. It is said that it is the latest successful refining of Xiawang Dan, but unfortunately there are not many, only 3. Kind of Chiu clasped his fist to thank you. Miyu has only one sentence whether the old Lu has enemies. Lu Yong laughed and waved his hands again and again. After the ferry left the land of Tongyi's Hao and entered the sea, Miyu was free and panicked, so he jumped off the Fengyuan ferry and traveled north with the sword. Bai Hong swept the sky. Qingping Peak within the small cave of Changchun. Qin Pingon chose the highest point of an attic among the deep valleys of the road, with the doors and windows closed. There is a futon, a table and an incense burner in the room. There are several books on the table: Shaking Mountain Boxing Book, Pill Book Authentic, Swordsmanship, Leiju written and edited by myself, and a book from Beiju Lazuna, the Broken Book of Zhou Xian Fu Ruins. There are also a lot of bamboo slips with inscriptions. Qin Pingon sat on the futon with his palms facing up, folded on his abdomen, closed his eyes and focused, breathing slowly. Like an old monk entering concentration, like a true monarch sitting and forgetting, like sitting on a corpse of a man. To the north of the central part of Tongyi's Hao, there is a small country under the jurisdiction of the vassal. As dusk approached, a young man with a Confucian shirt was carrying a fat man, lightning flashed and the heavy rain was rushing. The two stopped at a market ferry and the shabby scholar ordered 2 bowls of rock sugar lotus root noodles. The fat man raised his head, raised the bowl high and shook it vigorously. There was really no lotus root noodles left. Then he put down the bowl and complained, "Brother Zhong, since we are on the road, it would be better to take a Xianxia ferry. The celebration will be on the day of the beginning of spring next year, so there is no time for it." Zhong Kuei said, "If you are willing to settle the bill today, I will pay you to take the ferry." The fat man said without hesitation, "The scenery on the boat is the same, it's not very interesting. It's better to drive on 2 legs. The mountains and rivers encountered are more familiar. Just like now, there will be no big or small new things." The fat man pointed to the waterside outside the shop. It turned out that a salt merchant hired a big boat to anchor under the ancient temple, watching the tide grow in wind and rain. This torrential rain came suddenly and walked fast. When the rain stopped, there was a woman who was fishing at the water window of the building. She was fishing with a rod and wrapped her arms around her, making her arms as white and tender as her sleeves. Ouch, Fatty is a person who came here. He knew the reason why thinness is not as thin as he was. After a few glances at the woman, he lost his soul and couldn't move her eyes. Every time she took a pole and threw it, Fatty trembled a little with her heart. It's a pity that the woman is married as a woman by looking at the style of the woman spun. If it is a girl in a boudoir, the fat man will board the ship and go to recognize the father-in-law. As for the other party is a beautiful ghost with a disguised face, the fat guy really doesn't care, it's not vulgar to care about this. Zhong Kuei just glanced at Lu Chuan from the corner of his eye and said, "Don't provoke me. You're a lover who has a hard time," and he left after paying his favor. The fat man whispered, "With you here, who would I dare to provoke? I was in that small county town God's temple before. When I entered the door, good fellow, you have official status, but Lao Tzu is a lonely ghost almost being handcuffed on the spot. On the shackles, do you see what I said? Brother Zhong, honestly, before and after his death he has never suffered such a shame." And another bowl of rock sugar lotus root noodles. Zhong Kuei beckoned with the shop assistant, ordered 2 more bowls of lotus root noodles and smiled. "Master Qinghuang didn't apologize to you afterwards?" Hugh said that the sky is high without ears and eyes, and the dark room is wandering in the dark room. The fat man who named himself Gusu had already eaten a bowl of lotus root noodles again, and glanced at the bowl that Zhong Kuei hadn't moved his spoon before. Zhong Kuei pushed the white bowl to the fat man. And the fishing woman on that boat obviously also noticed the scholar and the fat man at the shore shop. But her cultivation is shallow and she can't see their identity and realm. She can only confirm one thing. Is it hell? The fat man asked in his heart. This river is not short, right? There is no water in river, woman? There are no city temples on both sides of the way? This female ghost is so courageous. Zhong Kuei said, "That arm shining is a token of the water mansion. There is a big lake 300 miles away upstream. The Lord of Water God Mansion likes to pretend to be a boatman, sell lotus roots for wine and drink, and is the same as the one who once put memorial poems in the water. The salt merchant in the year is an old acquaintance." The fat man frowned and said, "How do you see it?" Zhong Kuei said, "Use your eyes." The fat man asked when Zhong Kuei was paying for the check. "When I arrived at the Xindu mountain, you said that with my cultivation base except for Qin Pingon is it invincible? Even if he fell he was still a fairy. Zhong Kui smiled and said, "You'll know when you arrive." The fat man asked tentatively, "Then I'm asking Brother Qin for a chief consecration Kaching or something. It's not Luopashan, it's just a next clan. It's not too much, right?" Zhong Kui glanced at the fat man. "Ask yourself, I won't stop." The fat man smiled and lifted the empty bowl in his hand, turning his wrist over. "It must be easy." After that, the fat man followed the Uncle Zhong, who didn't know how to enjoy the blessings, trekking through the mountains and rivers, eating and sleeping all the way, and the pitiful autumn fat that he had finally raised had to be reduced. At the time of the new year they came to the Xindu mountain boundary, the mansion on the mountain, the ferry below the mountain, and the construction was everywhere. The dust was everywhere. The fat man waved his hand and frowned slightly. "I have to say, at the ferry crossing, I saw a group of people gathered around the table, making gestures to the manuscript paper. At the table stood a young man in white clothes with a mole on his eyebrows, a young woman with a ball in a bun, and a young monk with a yellow hat and blue shoes." The fat man was amazed. Hee little girl, at first glance she looked pretty handsome. Pei Qian saw Zhong Kui coming for a walk. She walked quickly, smiling brightly, and said with a fist in a distance, "Zhong clerk." The two sides stopped. Zhong Kui stretched out his hand and gestured for a moment, then smiled and asked, "Little Heighton?" Pei Qian nodded, squinted and smiled. Zhong Kui joked, "Have you married yet?" Pei Qian smiled and said, "Marry a hammer, don't marry." Zhong Kui laughed, "That's right, except Qin Pingon who can control you." Back in those days, at a young age, two hunters in Foxtown would be able to go round and round. The little black charcoal at that moment was really hard to describe in a word. Cui Dongshan and Xiaomo came here. Zhong Kui clasped his fist and said, "My name is Zhong Kui, I just laughed." Cui Dongshan said, "Cui Dongshan, the descendant of the Luopa mountain, has met Mr. Zhong." Xiaomo also said, "I worship Xiaomo, I have seen Mr. Zhong." Xiaomo glanced sideways at the fat man of the fairyland ghost. Was there something wrong with the trick? This guy was all on Pei Qian's side. How could Mr. Zhong have such an unreliable close follower? The fat man asked in his heart, "Xiaomo enshrines, what am I doing?" Xiaomo replied with a smile, "The visitor is a guest, why not do it?" The fat man heard the implication and he couldn't stop it. "Oh hey, I was almost scared to death. No, it scared me alive. It's the guest or else we have to make a point. Practice?" Xiaomo smiled and said, "Don't dare, neither Luopa mountain nor Xindu mountain has such a way of hospitality." The fat man looked terrified. "Brother Xiaomo, is this a grudge?" Xiaomo's smile remained unchanged. "How dare you be a brother to an immortal?" Cui Dongshan glanced at Zhong Kui. Zhong Kui smiled and shook his head. "Let's just leave this fat man who likes to die." On the Qingping Peak side he appeared in a green shirt and in an instant his figure fell on the side of the ferry. There is no slight ripple of qi machine, nor the slightest bit of jian qi. But this person's sword intent or the weight of qi caused the fat man to subconsciously move a step towards Zhong Kui. Qin Pingon and Zhong Kui each raised their hands and gave them heavy hands. Then Qin Pingon looked aside, smiled and asked, "Zhong Kui, who is this senior?" Zhong Kui was still the same. Yenner was bad and he immediately exposed the fat man around him. "It's the underwater senior who was chopped off by his sister-in-law." The fat man suddenly felt bad. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Hello, my name is Qin Pingon, I am Ning Yao's man." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.